Chapter 1883 Set Equipment of Astronomical Value. Chapter 1883 Set Equipment of Astronomical Value. 4 people sat in the second-floor VIP reception room in Zero Wing's guild residence. When Shifeng and Aqua Rose entered, these 4 people shifted their gazes toward the door. "Sorry for the long wait," Shifeng said. He was already acquainted with 2 of the 4 players, Unyielding Heart and Mu Lingsha. Shifeng also recognized the other 2. They had been experts that every large guild in God's domain had known about during his previous life. One of these 2 was a level 57, Tier 2 elementalist called Long Soul, while the other was a level 57, Tier 2 guardian knight called Hunting Blade. In the past, Long Soul had also been known as the Crimson Wizard, whereas Hunting Blade had been known as the Iron Giant. Although either had ranked on the God's Domain's experts list in the past, the Secret Pavilion had given them official titles. They hadn't ranked simply because they hadn't wanted to. Every superpower had their own secrets, and none of them would display every expert they had. Hence, under pressure from the various superpowers, the Secret Pavilion hadn't included every expert on the God's Domain experts list. However, the Secret Pavilion had still provided a brief description of some of these experts. All of the experts that had earned a title had striking battle records. Although Long Soul and Hunting Blade hadn't been as famous as Unyielding Heart, they weren't any weaker than the guild leader. Of course, the 2 players had only earned their titles after reaching Tier 3 in the game. At this point, few people knew these players' true abilities. "Guild leader Black Flame, you've come," Unyielding Heart said, smiling as he stood. He then gestured to Long Soul and Hunting Blade and said, "Let me introduce you. This is Long Soul, Unyielding Soul's chief elementalist, and this is Hunting Blade, Unyielding Soul's chief guardian knight." "Hello?" Both Long Soul and Hunting Blade nodded at Shifeng as they carefully observed the swordsman's every action, attempting to determine Shifeng's capabilities. Shifeng was a large part of the reason for Zero Wing's current success. The guild had even secured a foothold in the Ore Empire and forcibly dissuaded the various superpowers from targeting Zero Wing. Some time ago, Zero Wing had even sold Unyielding Soul a large number of level 55 dark gold weapons, which allowed Unyielding Soul to earn the first clear in a level 50, large-scale team dungeon and become the first guild in the Dark Knight Empire to reach 3-star status. It was because of these achievements that Unyielding Soul now had more capital to contend with Starlink in its home empire. Once everyone had been introduced, Unyielding Heart removed a list from his bag and handed it to Shifeng. A quick glance at the list left Shifeng confused. "Guild leader Black Flame, I suspect that you might be interested in the items listed, am I correct?" Unyielding Heart asked, smiling. "You are. Zero Wing is very interested in acquiring these items," Shifeng said, nodding. Every item on the list was a material that Zero Wing was currently trying to purchase in bulk. There were even materials for crafting the Hell Tank among them. Certain materials the Hell Tank required couldn't be acquired from team dungeons. Only a few special maps produced these materials. Unfortunately, the various large guilds valued these materials and usually didn't sell them. Hence, Melancholic Smile could only try her best to purchase these materials from other countries' independent players. Since he had no real reason to hide the fact, Shifeng acknowledged his need for these materials. Any large guild could easily deduce that Zero Wing was attempting to collect materials, after all. Only, these guilds did not know what Zero Wing wanted the materials for. "Unyielding Soul is willing to sell these materials to Zero Wing in bulk and at market price," Unyielding Heart said. "You're willing to sell Zero Wing?" Shifeng smiled. "That would be wonderful, but I doubt that's why you're here." If Unyielding Soul only wanted to sell Zero Wing these rare materials, Unyielding Heart wouldn't have personally visited the guild. He could have simply sent a subordinate to initiate the transaction. Moreover, Unyielding Heart had gone so far as to bring the Crimson Wizard and Iron Giant with him. "Of course, that's not the only reason I've come. I would like to trade these rare materials for the Dark Corrosion set and Sundial set earlier than planned. I believe the price I have to offer will be to your satisfaction," Unyielding Heart said, nodding as he revealed his true motive. "You want to conduct the transaction in advance?" Glancing at Long Soul and Hunting Blade, Sherfong realized why Unyielding Heart had brought these two with him today. Unfortunately, I've already informed you and the Phoenix Pavilion Master of the auction date for the two sets. If I trade with you now, I'm afraid that it won't be fair to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. The Dark Corrosion set and Sundial set were both level 55 to level 60 Dark Gold set equipment. If Long Soul and Hunting Blade could use these sets now, they could be of great help to their guild. It was no wonder why Unyielding Heart wished to conduct the transaction ahead of time. I understand. That is why Unyielding Soul is willing to offer you 70,000 golds worth of rare materials or magic crystals for the two sets. I don't believe that even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is capable of making such an offer. If you're uncertain, we can also contact the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and conduct an impromptu auction right now. I believe the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion won't object to the arrangement, Unyielding Heart said. When Long Soul and Hunting Blade heard Unyielding Soul's statement, their expressions changed. They both wondered if their guild leader had lost his mind. This wasn't the price they had agreed on earlier. Not only had Unyielding Heart asked to purchase the two sets for 70,000 gold, but he even offered to settle the bill with extremely rare materials. For that price, they could purchase quite a few sets of individual level 60 Dark Gold equipment. 70,000 gold in rare materials? Sherfong was astonished when he heard the proposal. Sherfong had to admit that the offer was tempting. He had intended to set the starting bid for the Dark Corrosion set at 24,000 gold, and that price was only so high because the set was meant for MTs. He had thought he'd be lucky to sell the Sundial set for 10,000 gold. At best, he had estimated that he could sell the two sets for a total of 50,000 gold. Yet, Unyielding Heart had just offered 70,000 gold for the sets. Moreover, he was willing to pay with the rare materials Sherfong needed to produce the Hell Tank. As Unyielding Heart had stated, Phoenix Rain couldn't match such an astronomical price. The Dark Corrosion set and Sundial sets were only level 60 Dark Gold set equipment at best, not epic equipment, which could be used until level 100 or beyond. Aqua Rose, who stood quietly to the side, flashed Unyielding a surprised expression. She hadn't expected the other guild leader to be so mad. Now that Silverwing had garrisoned in the secret stone fortress and transferred a large number of guild members to it, the guild urgently needed a large number of coins and resources. If Silverwing could secure the resources Unyielding Heart had just offered, this transaction could accelerate Silverwing's occupation of the Ore Empire's southeastern region. When Unyielding Heart saw Sherfong and Aqua Rose's satisfied expressions, his smile brightened. Although he had offered to purchase the sets at a much higher price than he had initially planned, he had done so to avoid a scene. If he had competed with Phoenix Rain in an auction, the risk of leaked information would increase. Remorsefully, Sherfong shook his head. 70,000 gold is indeed tempting, but please allow me to refuse, Sherfong said as he returned the list to Unyielding Heart, firm determination in his eyes. Are you not satisfied with my offer? Unyielding Heart was stunned. Long Soul and Hunting Blade stared at Sherfong, as well. They both thought that Sherfong had lost his mind. No one else would offer such a generous price, yet Sherfong had rejected it. No, I find it quite satisfying, Sherfong answered truthfully. Then why? Unyielding Heart's confidence began to crumble as he stared at Sherfong. Unfortunately, I'm more interested in the Sea of Trees, Sherfong said, chuckling. Chapter 1884 Tier 2 Special Class. Chapter 1884 Tier 2 Special Class. After Sherfong's statement, the room fell deathly silent. This? Unyielding Heart couldn't help but stare at Sherfong in shock. He had never dreamed that Sherfong's appetite would be so intense. Not only wasn't the man satisfied with 70,000 gold in rare materials, but he had also set his sights on Unyielding Soul's Sea of Trees. The Sea of Trees? Questions filled Aqua Rose's mind. She didn't recognize the name, and that made her curious. What was the Sea of Trees that it was enough for Sherfong to refuse so many valuable resources? Moreover, based on Unyielding Heart and his companion's expressions, the Sea of Trees clearly wasn't ordinary. Guild leader Black Flame, if you wish to involve the Sea of Trees in this transaction, Unyielding Soul will have to bow out, Long Soul firmly declared as he stood. It is best if you consider something else. The Sea of Trees was a legendary city in the Dark Knight Empire. Anybody could learn that much after a little research. Besides, it was no longer a secret in the Empire. Many experts had already learned of the Sea of Trees and traveled to Dark Knight City to join Starlink. However, unlike Starlink, Unyielding Soul had no intentions of sharing the Sea of Trees. Hunting Blade nodded as well from beside Long Soul. The Sea of Trees was far beyond Unyielding Soul's bottom line. Zerowing must be dreaming if it thought it could demand a share of the profits in exchange for 2 dark gold set equipment. Don't be in such a hurry to refuse. Aren't you interested in what I have to offer? Long Soul's reaction didn't particularly surprise Sherfone. The Sea of Trees was a unique secret land, which had been created by the 6 great primordial elf kings. Like Primordial City, the Sea of Trees could provide players immense help, but the Sea of Trees primarily focused on magic research. Players could find many magic arrays that weren't available in God's Domain's NPC towns and cities. Players could also improve their grasp on magic arrays, as well as their spell completion rates. Because of this, the various major powers in the past had placed heavy importance on the Sea of Trees. After the Sea of Trees activated, players would only be able to visit the city if they had a key. As a result, the city's entry slots were incredibly precious. However, as players continued to unlock more of the city's features, the entry conditions would loosen. In the end, the Sea of Trees had become one of the most famous NPC cities throughout God's Domain. Meanwhile, the Sea of Trees' most well-known benefit was its Tier 2 special class, Traveling Bard. As one of the few semi-support classes available at Tier 2, the class had the ability to boost teammates, although the Traveling Bard didn't command high DPS. A Traveling Bard could increase a 100-man team's combat power by at least 15%. This was why the various large guilds had valued this Tier 2 special class. Naturally, Unyielding Soul would have a greater advantage if it monopolized the class for as long as possible. It doesn't matter what you say. We won't budge on this matter, Long Soul growled resolutely. Unyielding Soul had researched the Traveling Bard class in detail, so they knew just how much help the class would provide to a team. As long as Unyielding Soul had Traveling Bard players, the guild could clear team dungeons far faster than other superpowers. As for Starlink and Crimson Emperor, who had also obtained keys to enter the Sea of Trees, either would share their slots to ensure their advantage over their competition. What if I told you that I have a way to increase players' success rate of becoming Traveling Bards? Sherfone asked, chuckling. I know a little about the Traveling Bard class. I have heard that a limited number of players can class change into a Traveling Bard, 20 per week, I think. Moreover, I don't believe that Unyielding Soul is the only guild in the Dark Knight Empire that has acquired the keys to enter the city. How do you know this? Long Soul stared at Sherfone in shock. The matter regarding the city's keys should have been a core secret that only their 3 guilds knew. Players outside of the guilds should only know that they could become Traveling Bards after visiting the Sea of Trees, but how could such a massive advantage exist without limit? There was indeed a player limit for the promotion quest. Only 20 players could acquire the class each week. Once that limit had been reached, players would have to wait 7 days before they could attempt the class change. Increase the class change success rate? Guild leader Black Flame, do you really have a way of doing so? Unyielding Heart could not help his growing interest. Although 7 days wasn't a long time, it wasn't very short either. The various superpowers' main force members would surpass level 60 after 2 cooldown cycles. At that time, Tier 2 players would not be as much of a rarity. Fortunately, the Traveling Bard's value wouldn't lessen in that time, although the class would be most valuable during the first 2 cooldown cycles. Currently, the Dark Knight Empire's 3 main powers vied for these first 20 slots. If it were possible to increase the class change success rate, Unyielding Soul would have a massive advantage over its competition. Of course. Moreover, my method increases the success rate by at least 20%, Sherfone confidently explained. A 20% improvement? Unyielding Heart gasped. Although the Traveling Bard's class change quest was slightly easier than the usual Tier 2 promotion quest, that didn't mean it was easy. The expert's unyielding soul had carefully selected to attempt the class change only had a success rate of roughly 50%. If it were possible to increase that by 20%, unyielding soul could monopolize the 20 slots. The Sea of Trees initial entry slots are incomparably precious. Besides, how do we know that you're telling us the truth? Long Soul stated. I don't have any proof. It is up to you to believe me or not. I only want 10 entry slots into the city. I'll also reduce the price for the 2 sets to 50,000 gold in resources, Shifeng said, smiling. You! For a time, Long Soul was at a loss for words. All right, I'll agree to your offer on behalf of Unyielding Soul, Mu Lingsha, who had remained silent all this time, said suddenly. Miss Mu, what if he's just spouting nonsense? Long Soul tried to dissuade the woman. I don't believe that guild leader Black Flame would trick us. Furthermore, his understanding of the Traveling Bard class isn't inferior to ours in the least. This proves that he knows what he's talking about, Mu Lingsha said. Since Mu Lingsha was so determined, Long Soul had no choice but to nod silently. However, as Mu Lingsha had implied, only the core upper echelons of the Dark Knight Empire's 3 major guilds should know any details related to the Traveling Bard class. Information leaks should be impossible, yet Shifeng had revealed accurate information on the class. This proved that he indeed knew something. All right, let us sign a contract then. Once Unyielding Soul's group had agreed, Shifeng revealed a contract he had prepared beforehand. He then filled in some of the blank areas of the contract before handing it to Unyielding Soul's representatives. The conditions were very simple. Unyielding Soul would give Zero Wing 10 entry slots to the Sea of Trees and 50,000 gold in rare resources. In return, Zero Wing would hand over the 2 dark gold set equipment and the information on how to increase the class change success rate for the Traveling Bard class. After both sides had signed the contract, Shifeng revealed his method to Mu Lingsha. In truth, the method was very simple: learn how to produce magic arrays. As long as one could manufacture intermediate magic arrays, players would have a far easier time when attempting the Traveling Bard class change quest. Although the method was simple, nurturing players to the intermediate magician standard wouldn't be. Hence, Shifeng had only asked for 10 slots. After all, the number of Tier 1 players that could craft intermediate magic arrays was incredibly low. Most expert players in God's domain would be fortunate if they could produce basic magic arrays, much less intermediate rank. Both sides then agreed to meet up in Dark Knight City 2 days before they'd head to the Sea of Trees. When Shifeng had completed his side of the bargain, he received 50,000 gold in resources. These materials should be enough to set up the basic teleportation device. Shifeng smiled at the magic crystals and materials Unyielding Heart had transferred to him. Although the system had awarded a basic teleportation device, setting it up in a town or city required additional magic crystals and materials. In fact, the task demanded 20,000 magic crystals and roughly 4,000 gold in materials. Previously, due to the battle against Beast Emperor, Zero Wing had spent most of the magic crystals it had stockpiled. Fortunately, Shifeng's deal with Unyielding Heart had netted him 40,000 magic crystals, more than enough to set up the basic teleportation device. Immediately after the meeting, Shifeng made his way for Silverwing Town's most popular attraction _ the airport. Chapter 1885 Basic Teleportation Device Silverwing Town, Airport. Chapter 1885 Basic Teleportation Device. Silverwing Town, Airport. Due to the airport's appearance, the previously desolate sector of the town had become a hub for players and NPCs. Many players lingered outside of the airport, hawking their wares or recruiting team members. So, this is Silverwing Town? The players here are so high-leveled. The town's average level can already compete with Black Dragon City's players. Don't you know? Many expert players have come to develop in Silverwing Town since it has become easier to travel here from Starmoon City, and the town's transportation quests offer such bountiful rewards. I've heard that players can even purchase cheap secret silver weapons and equipment from Silverwing Town's transportation firm from time to time. As players left the airport, some couldn't help their surprise when they saw how prosperous Silverwing Town had become. Practically every player roaming the street outside the airport was level 53 or above, with the majority being level 54 and 55. Tier 2 experts were also common. However, the players selling equipment and tools were the most shocking. In Black Dragon City, the Black Dragon Empire's imperial capital, players rarely sold level 50 secret silver equipment. However, on the street outside the airport, quite a few players did just that. Moreover, their prices were 20% lower than in Black Dragon City. Although, despite the 20% discount, the prices were still beyond ordinary players' budgets. Meanwhile, after receiving a brief explanation on Silverwing Town, first-time visitors' eyes glowed with excitement. Based on what they had heard thus far, developing in Silverwing Town would be far more successful than in Black Dragon City. Not only did the town offer many income sources for independent players like themselves, but acquiring level 50 weapons and equipment was also easier here. It was even said that the transportation firm offered level 50 fine gold weapons and equipment. The only problem was the transportation firm contribution point requirement, and those would not be easy to collect. The airport's benefits are really amazing. It's no wonder why guild towns with airports had quickly become advanced cities, Shifeng thought as he gazed at the crowded street before him. He had never thought that the airport would become so prosperous after just a few days. Although he had told Aqua Rose to increase Silverwing Town's player population limit, he didn't think it would be long before they reached the new limit. If he wanted to resolve this issue, he'd have to upgrade Silverwing Town to an advanced town soon. Although an advanced town was still a town, it was significantly larger than an intermediate town, nearly half the size of a basic city. However, upgrading Silverwing Town to advanced rank wouldn't be an easy task. Aside from the required popularity, neutral towns needed sufficient security to qualify for a promotion. Currently, gaining popularity wasn't a problem for Silverwing Town. With how many players the airport and transportation firm attracted, Silverwing Town gained a large amount of popularity each day. It wouldn't be long before Silverwing Town met the requirement for an advanced town. Unfortunately, doing the same for the town's security would be challenging. In terms of defensive structures, Silverwing Town definitely passed as it had 5 magic towers and a large number of defense turrets. However, any additional defense turrets wouldn't provide much to the town's security. A town or city's security was divided into 2 factors: defensive structures and NPC soldiers. There were 2 methods of increasing NPC soldiers' strength. The first involved improving the soldiers' combat standards. The second required upgrading the NPC soldiers' weapons and equipment. Unfortunately, not even Shifeng had a method of improving the NPCs' combat standards. It all depended on the NPCs the town recruited. All he could do right now to strengthen Silverwing Town's NPC soldiers was improve their weapons and equipment. However, boosting the NPC soldiers to meet the strength requirement for a promotion would require a large number of coins. To reach the security standard for a promotion to advanced rank, 600 of Silverwing Town's 2,000 NPC soldiers would need to wear full sets of fine gold equipment. Currently, only 120 NPC soldiers wielded fine gold equipment. Meanwhile, gearing the remaining 480 NPCs would cost close to 290,000 gold in total. The greatest difficulty other guilds faced when trying to upgrade a neutral town was the town's popularity. During his previous life, the guild towns had generally fulfilled their security requirements long before they fulfilled their popularity requirements. However, Zero Wing was the exact opposite. This was precisely the reason for Shifeng's current headache. Zero Wing simply didn't have enough money. From an outsider's point of view, Zero Wing was quite wealthy. However, Shifeng knew how truly broke his guild was. Just taking care of Silverwing Town's development had drastically slowed Zero Wing City and the Lost Towns. Now, he also needed 290,000 gold to upgrade Silverwing Town. This predicament was the reason he had set his sights on the Sea of Trees. In Unyielding Soul's opinion, He just wanted the Traveling Bard class to strengthen Zero Wing's teams so that the guild could secure better weapons and equipment. In reality, however, the Traveling Bard class was nothing to him. The Sea of Trees itself was his true target. As players gradually unlocked the city's various features, the legendary Dream City would enjoy immense fame throughout the continent of God's domain. Thus far, the populace was still unaware that the Sea of Trees was actually a trade city for the various neutral races. Of course, this feature would only become available after players had removed the city's second seal. At that time, neutral NPCs would swarm to the Sea of Trees, and after the third seal was removed, neutral players would join them. At that time, like Blackwing City's passes, the Sea of Trees keys would become more common in neutral races' maps. The keys would no longer be limited to the Dark Knight Empire. Unlocking this feature would also open trade between human players and neutral players. Although there did not seem to be many neutral players in the game right now, when they gathered, they would easily outnumber an Empire's player population. After all, many players desired a stronger body, and becoming a neutral race would satisfy this desire. Since no one knew the secret yet, he had to prepare to secure a share of the profits, using this opportunity to make a fortune. It wouldn't be long before the Sea of Trees' second seal was removed, and if he didn't take action quickly, the Dark Knight Empire's three main powers would claim the Dream City's benefits. However, gaining these benefits had a prerequisite. Coins. Lots and lots of coins. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng hurried towards a large, empty shop not far from the airport. This was one of the many shops Shifeng had left empty specifically for the airport. Immediately, Shifeng took out the basic teleportation device and a large number of materials from his bag. He then began to set up the device in the center of the shop's main hall. After working nonstop for 8 hours, Shifeng finally formed the necessary magic arrays and magic circuits, connecting them to the basic teleportation device. As he finished his work, he released a sigh of relief. The necessary magic arrays were not easy to form. Players needed a strong understanding of advanced magic arrays to do so. Creating the necessary magic circuits was even more complex. These magic circuits had to be connected to God's domain's ley lines. Normally, the task required 3 advanced magicians, but since he was Zero Wing's only advanced magician right now, he had to complete the task slowly. Fortunately, he had grasped the production process for advanced magic arrays. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to utilize the basic teleportation device at all. System, you have successfully connected the leyline magic circuit. Do you wish to activate the basic teleportation device? Activate! Chapter 1886 Prosperous Silverwing. Chapter 1886 Prosperous Silverwing. In the quiet hall, the basic teleportation device activated, and magic arrays began to manifest on the ground. A short moment later, a silver, threefold magic array appeared above the teleportation device, glowing with a dazzling light. The moment this threefold magic array appeared, the ambient mana rapidly gathered to the teleportation device. A pillar of silver light rose from the teleportation device, piercing through the ceiling and rising out of the shop. Every player in Silverwing Town could see the commotion activating the teleportation device had caused. As the silver light pillar rose beyond the clouds, it exploded. A silver light then rippled through the sky. In the blink of an eye, the ripple had enveloped all of Silverwing Town. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the silver ripple vanished. What just happened? Was that some kind of magical attack? Isn't the airport in that sector? Did someone just attack the airport? As the light pillar and ripple disappeared, questions overwhelmed the town's players. Some curious players started to make their way towards the airport to investigate. Meanwhile, inside the large shop, Shifeng grinned as he looked at the operational teleportation device. If an airport could attract players to a town, boosting its development, then a teleportation device would bring abundant wealth. This was especially true for Silverwing Town, a town in a dangerous place like the Or Empire. Hopefully, this thing's teleportation range is a little longer. Shifeng immediately inspected the teleportation device. In God's domain, teleportation device's range wasn't fixed, even for devices of the same rank. The teleportation device's range varied based on its environment. Basic teleportation devices' teleportation range could cover anywhere between 500,000 yards and 1 million. The range was vast enough to teleport players across a small leveling map. Meanwhile, the further the basic teleportation device could reach, the larger Silverwing Town's safe zone would be. After all, if enemy players attacked Zero Wings within the teleportation range, the guild could send reinforcements instantly. This was also the reason that other powers rarely attacked towns with teleportation devices. A single mistake could easily lead to utter annihilation. As Silverwing called up the basic teleportation device's attribute panel, the system revealed the device's statistics. Maximum teleportation distance, 710,000 yards. Maximum users at one time, 100 people. Teleportation cost, every 150,000 yards per person requires 1 unit of mana. 1 unit of mana for every 150,000 yards with a maximum of 710,000 yards. Not bad. Silverwing was relatively satisfied with the teleportation device's statistics. 1 magic crystal yielded between 100 to 130 units of mana. In other words, 1 magic crystal would be enough to teleport between 100 to 130 people across 150,000 yards. This cost was much lower than an ordinary teleportation magic array. For example, the teleportation house in White River City cost 1/5 of a magic crystal to teleport 1 player from White River City to the Twin Towers Kingdom, which was 20 units of mana or more. After inspecting the statistics, Silverwing transferred 20 NPC managers from the battle arena to the basic teleportation device. He also set this shop up as Silverwing Town's teleportation point. As for the usage fees, he had set it at 80 copper per 150,000 yards per person. Although the profits wouldn't be astronomical with this price, even ordinary players would find it acceptable. This would no doubt attract many players to the teleportation service, which would, in turn, generate massive income. At the very least, Silverwing Town's teleportation device would earn him more than the Secret Stone Fortress's teleportation service. Although the teleportation array in the fortress consumed far less mana than this teleportation device, the fortress's managers only received a portion of the profits after deducting the operation costs. Once Silverwing finished with the shop, he instructed his NPCs to open it to the public. Many players had already gathered on the street outside of the shop due to the airport, and after seeing the silver light pillar, even more players had joined the crowd. The moment the shop opened, a flood of players surged in out of curiosity. What's going on? Silverwing Town even offers teleportation services to nearby areas? I thought only fortresses have this kind of teleportation function. This is wonderful! Traveling into the Ore Empire's inner region to quest is such a pain. Now that I can just teleport there, I'll save so much time. When the crowd of independent players discovered the teleportation shop's function, their eyes glistened with excitement. Although the teleportation price was slightly higher than that in the Ore Empire's fortresses, it was still within ordinary players' budgets. Moreover, Silverwing Town's living standards were far better than that of teleportation fortresses. Not only was the town's mana density incredibly high, but it also had a battle arena, in which players could train. Silverwing Town even had the transportation firm, which offered high-ranked weapons and equipment. The services Silverwing Town offered were no match for teleportation fortresses. As news of the teleportation shop spread, thousands of players fought to use it. In the few minutes since the shop had opened, it had generated 10 gold in profit. The teleportation shop's money-making speed was simply frightening. At this rate, as long as there were enough magic crystals available to continue operation, generating 10,000 gold in profit would be child's play for the teleportation shop. Silverwing Town's teleportation device was even more lucrative than Zero Wing City's 4 towers of elements. Of course, Silverwing had expected this. There were already more players using Silverwing Town's teleportation service than those in Zero Wing City, which had decreased since the players who wanted to travel to the Ore Empire had long since done so. Moreover, most players visiting the Empire were here to develop themselves. They'd likely remain in the Ore Empire for some time. Furthermore, due to the airport's recent construction, many players had opted to travel to the Ore Empire via airship. This further reduced the number of players who used Zero-Wing City's teleportation services. In addition, Silverwing Town's teleportation service allowed players to teleport directly to the Secret Stone Fortress. Players could then use the Secret Stone Fortress's teleportation service to travel to the Ore Empire's inner region. Players who wanted to enjoy both Silverwing Town's benefits and grind in the Empire's inner region would frequently use the town's teleportation services. Including the players trying to enter the town each day, far more players would utilize the town's teleportation services than those in Zero-Wing City. News of Silverwing Town's teleportation service quickly spread throughout the Ore Empire. It was enough motivation for players that quested and grinded in the Empire to shift their base of operations to Silverwing Town. Previously, not many players had settled down in Silverwing Town since it was so far from the Ore Empire's inner region, making travel to and from inconvenient. But since Silverwing had resolved this issue, these players would naturally set up their base in the town. Although the cost would be slightly higher, the town's benefits would make it worthwhile. The players operating in the Ore Empire's inner region were at least elites, as well, so spending a few extra silver coins each day wouldn't be a problem. For a time, the number of players trying to enter Silverwing Town skyrocketed. Meanwhile, Blackwater's upper echelons and Beast Emperor learned about this recent development. They wore gloomy expressions. They had hoped that the various superpowers would gang up on Zero-Wing, but not only hadn't that happened, but Silverwing Town also had a teleportation function now. With this, Zero-Wing's control over the Ore Empire's southeastern region would grow even stronger. Dust, the item you've mentioned is incomparably precious. It will definitely be difficult to acquire. If you have it, how confident are you of gaining full control of the evil Dragonification magic array? Beast Emperor asked the man beside him, Dust Edge, from his seat in the Evil God's Branch Temple in Ancient Rock City. He had planned to use the Dark Players and Bounty Hunters to whittle Zero-Wing's combat power and financial strength down, but now, this plan would likely fail. He also lacked the forces to launch a direct assault on Silverwing Town. Although Blackwater was powerful, it had recently acquired the Crimson Flame Fortress. It was still in the process of reinforcing its strength, and also lacked the power to destroy Zero-Wing's town. Currently, Dust Edge's evil Dragonification legacy was his only hope. Unlike nurturing evil beasts and evil demons, producing evil dragons only required rare materials and players. I can't guarantee success, but I'm 80% confident I can gain full control over the magic array. Once I do, I'll be able to create even stronger evil dragons. Including the Evil God's Temple's current forces, destroying Silverwing Town should be a breeze. Dust Edge proclaimed, confidence shining in his eyes. We'll wipe all of Zero-Wing from the face of God's domain, not to mention removing the guild from the Ore Empire. Good. I'll notify Blackwater and Dark Soul now and have them secure the item for you as soon as possible. Seeing the confidence in Dust Edge's eyes, Beast Emperor couldn't wait to see the completed evil dragon. Meanwhile, in Silverwing Town's candlelight trading firm, Silverwing had begun to rent out the shops around the airport. He had set the rent at 3,000 gold per month for small shops and 5,000 gold per month for large shops. Naturally, there were a limited number of shops available, so they would be rented out on a first-come, first-served basis. The moment the guild revealed the rental prices, the town's interested merchant players were stunned. This is insane! Has Zero-Wing gone mad for money? Chapter 1887 Foundations Solidifying. Chapter 1887 Foundations Solidifying. Once the candlelight trading firm had published the shop's rental prices, the town's merchant players and nearby bystanders gaped in shock. Crap! 3,000 gold to rent a shop for 1 month? I can buy a shop in an NPC city with that kind of money! Silverwing Town can't even compare to an NPC city, yet Zero-Wing dares set the rent so high. Who could possibly afford such a price? If I had 3,000 gold, I could fully equip myself in top-tier equipment. With that kind of equipment, I'd be able to earn back the gold in a month if I'm lucky. It'd be far more profitable than renting a shop in Silverwing Town. For a time, Silverwing Town's players heatedly discussed the astronomical rent. Guild leader, I'm afraid that very few merchant players will be able to afford this price. Many capable trading firms have offered to rent the shops long-term if we lower the price by 30%, as well. Why don't we drop it just a little? Aqua Rose suggested from her seat in the second-floor hall. Truthfully, even she thought that Shifeng's price was a little too high. It might be acceptable for the shops in Zero Wing City since the city had over 5 million player residents. The city's merchant players would accept such a high rent. Even the players that purchased permanent shops in NPC cities still had to pay a 15% monthly property tax, after all. Moreover, this property tax would change based on the shop's monthly evaluation. The tax wasn't fixed based on the initial purchase price. However, Silverwing Town wasn't Zero Wing City. Although it had already become an intermediate town, it could only accommodate a limited number of players at a time. Right now, its player population was nowhere near that of a major NPC city, not to mention Zero Wing City. Tell them that my price isn't that high considering Silverwing Town's current prosperity. If they refuse, we won't push the matter. However, I can't guarantee that the prices won't increase after another fortnight, Shifeng said nonchalantly. Silverwing Town was home to the treasure trove known as the Transportation firm, which allowed players to purchase rare items. If players purchased these rare items before reselling them in other countries, they could make quite a profit. In addition, the shops themselves could be used as warehouses to store items. If his plans for the Sea of Trees hadn't required so many coins, he wouldn't have chosen to rent out Silverwing Town's shops yet. Guild leader, I've also received a report regarding the Orc capital city. It seems that Blackwater has removed the seal on the Orc capital city's armory. The various large guilds have already dispatched expert teams to explore the armory. Although we are attempting to do the same, Blackwater's surveillance around the regional dungeon is quite tight. If we approach, Blackwater's members will intercept us. We can't get anywhere near the city, Aqua Rose said worriedly. However, the Orc capital city's armory is guaranteed to contain a plethora of war weapons. If we let Blackwater claim them, it'll be detrimental for our guild's development in the Empire. They've opened the Orc capital city's armory? Shifeng frowned. Blackwater is certainly impressive. The Orc capital city was an Azura mode regional dungeon, which doubtlessly had bountiful resources. Needless to say, plenty of war weapons were stored within regional dungeons' armories. It was a perfect location to secure war weapons for the large guilds that lacked such things. However, since Blackwater controlled the Crimson Flame Fortress, it essentially controlled the path to the Orc capital city. Moreover, Blackwater would have a much easier time eliminating Zero Wing's members once they entered the city since the guild had the home ground advantage. If Blackwater truly acquired a large number of war weapons, it would become a detriment to Zero Wing. Zero Wing had solidified its position in the Orc Empire because it had far more and stronger war weapons than other guilds. If it lost this advantage, Blackwater would have a much easier time capturing Silverwing Town. The various superpowers might even take advantage of the situation to strike at Zero Wing while it was down. Based on our reports, the various superpowers have begun to prepare for the armory's exploration. If we fall behind, Aqua Rose felt utterly helpless about the situation. While Zero Wing could sneak some of its experts into the Orc capital city, they could only send in so many before attracting Blackwater's attention. If they didn't send in enough, however, the participating superpowers could easily chase them away. We'll give up on the Orc capital city, Shifeng decided after considering the matter. Give up? But Shifeng's response surprised Aqua Rose. If they gave up on the Orc capital city, Zero Wing's situation would become quite awkward once the various superpowers had explored the armory and acquired a stock of war weapons. I'm not done. Although we'll give up on the Orc capital city, we can still explore other locations. The Orc capital city isn't the only regional dungeon in God's domain, Shifeng said, chuckling. How many Tier 2 players do we currently have? Thanks to the primordial souls, our members have had an easier time with their Tier 2 promotions than other guilds' members. We now have more than 400 Tier 2 players, and quite a few players are still attempting to complete their promotion quests. I don't think it will be long before we have 1,000 Tier 2 players, Aqua Rose said, a little excited. Zero Wing already had enough Tier 2 players to rival superpowers, and as time passed, the guild might even surpass the various major powers in God's domain. She had to admit that monopolizing a large fraction of Primordial City's resources gave Zero Wing a massive advantage. Zero Wing had far fewer experts than the various superpowers, but after acquiring the Primordial Souls, Zero Wing's members had a much easier time with their Tier 2 promotion quests. The guild also had an advantage in the equipment its members wore. We have so many already? Sherfone was a little surprised by this revelation. It was far more than he had expected. Currently, the various first-rate guilds were lucky if they even had 40 Tier 2 experts. Excellent. In that case, take Icarus's heart and organize a 300-man team to raid the Salic Mountains. Grind the giant rock beasts there. Kill as many as you can for their loot. It'll also be a good opportunity to level up. However, be careful as you explore the map. Although it isn't an Azura mode regional dungeon, it is still one of the rare Hell mode regional dungeons. The Salic Mountains occupied a level 60 to level 90 neutral map near the Storm Empire. Meanwhile, the regional dungeon was well known for its production of fine Titan Oregon. Fine Titan ore was far more valuable than Titan Oregon. Although it could be acquired from 100-man team dungeons, the drop rate was painfully low. Although the fine Titan ore's drop rate in the Salic Mountains was also relatively low, less than 3% for Great Lord ranked giant rock beasts, the regional dungeon was home to plenty of these monsters. However, grinding in the regional dungeon had a condition: players had to reach Tier 2 first. Previously, Zero Wing had only nurtured several dozen Tier 2 players, not nearly enough to grind in the regional dungeon effectively. Hence, he had set the endeavor aside. However, now that the guild had so many Tier 2 players, he could use this opportunity to collect fine Titan ore, which was the main material needed to produce the Guardian puppet. Once he had the fine Titan ore, he would only have to wait until Melancholic Smile had nurtured the necessary master lifestyle players. Shifeng's order left Aqua Rose a little confused. She didn't understand why he wanted to grind monsters so far from their territories, but since he had given the order, she had no choice but to accept Icarus's heart and do as he had told her. Meanwhile, all 20 of the shops Sherfong had offered had been filled after only a day. Of the 15 small shops and 5 large shops he had prepared, none were vacant. In the blink of an eye, Sherfong had earned 70,000 gold. This dumbfounded many merchant and independent players. They all wondered if the shop's tenants were crazy to spend so many coins on these shops. By the time the appointed date to set off for the Sea of Trees arrived, Sherfong had earned a total of 120,000 gold from Zero Wing's territories and selling the materials he had acquired from the Ice Crystal world. Following which, Sherfong took his money and 9 Tier 1 experts to the Dark Knight Empire's Dark Knight City. Chapter 1888 Undead Knight Dark Knight Empire, Dark Knight City. Chapter 1888 Undead Knight Dark Knight Empire, Dark Knight City. When Sherfong and the 9 experts Aqua Rose had carefully selected left the teleportation hall, they were greeted by a crowded street. Many of the players among the crowd were independent experts. Many of these independent players were at level 55 or above and very weak equipped, with quite a few pieces of level 50 secret silver equipment. As if they were on a pilgrimage, these independent players ventured towards Dark Knight City's business district. At a glance, there were easily more than 5,000 of these players. Why are so many experts here? Sherfone was surprised by the number of experts on the street. While it was true that a large number of experts tended to gather in Empire's capitals, he had never seen so many independent experts in an imperial capital before. Not even the 4 major empires' capitals were this popular. As Sherfone wondered about the reason for this gathering, he heard shouting from a short distance away. Players wishing to class change to a Tier 2 traveling bard, head to Starlink's residence to apply as soon as possible. The guild will only accept applications for another 30 minutes. Upon hearing the announcement, the independent experts began to charge down the street. Starlink is so stingy. Despite controlling the path to the Sea of Trees, it's only recruiting 200 non-guild players. I know, right? How could 200 slots be enough for so many people? I've heard that players had begun to line up outside of Starlink's residence 10 hours ago. There are already more than 100,000 players in line right now. The most infuriating part of it all is that instead of recruiting based on individual strength, Starlink is recruiting based on one's skill with magic arrays. I'm a berserker. I almost never have to deal with magic arrays. Even magical class players rarely learn that stuff. That subclass can help improve one's combat power, and you have to waste a lot of time researching arrays. However, I've also heard that if you become a traveling bard, you instantly get access to the same treatment as Starlink's core members. If you don't want to compete in Starlink, you can do so over at Unyielding Soul. Shortly after Starlink began its recruitment, Unyielding Soul did the same for the traveling bard class change. However, it only has 100 slots available. Though, like Starlink, you'll receive core member treatment if you complete the class change. I really didn't expect a Tier 2 class change to require knowledge on controlling magic arrays. If I had known about it earlier, I would have studied magic arrays a while ago. The players on the streets chatted as they watched the swarm of players rush towards Starlink and Unyielding Soul's guild residences, discussing the two guilds' recruitment standards. They also expressed their regrets about not learning to control magic arrays earlier. Starlink is recruiting players with knowledge on magic arrays? Shirfong frowned a little when he overheard the nearby players' conversations. Does Unyielding Soul have a leak? Aside from himself and Aqua Rose, only Unyielding Soul's members knew about the method of increasing players' success rate during the Traveling Bard's class change quest at this stage of the game. Unless Starlink had discovered it as well, its recruitment conditions wouldn't have been so specific. Magic arrays were usually only useful to lifestyle players. The benefits of manipulating magic arrays would be minuscule at best to combat players. Moreover, that was limited to magical classes. Knowledge regarding magic arrays was basically useless to physical classes. While Shirfong and his group traveled toward the Purple Night Plaza, the agreed meeting place, players crowded every inch of the plaza. Tens of thousands of players from Unyielding Soul, Starlink, and Crimson Emperor surrounded the area, and every one of these players wore full sets of level 50 secret silver equipment at minimum. Some of these guild players even carried level 50 dark gold weapons. The scene made the lingering independent players envious. Meanwhile, only these three guilds' members were allowed to enter the Purple Night Plaza right now. Outsiders could only watch from a distance. As Shirfong and his group approached, Mu Lingsha, who had been waiting for them for quite some time, led them to an area Unyielding Soul's members had cordoned off, instantly attracting many players' attention. Who are those people? Didn't they say that the three guilds have reserved the entire plaza? Based on their guild emblems, they don't seem to be from Unyielding Soul. I think I've seen that guild emblem before. Right. That's the guild emblem for the guild that has garrisoned in the Or Empire's secret stone fortress. That's Zero Wing's emblem. But why are Zero Wing's members here? Didn't they say that the three main guilds weren't even giving the Sea of Trees slots to players from first-rate guilds? Zero Wing is pretty impressive. It actually gained Unyielding Soul's favor and earned some slots for itself. TCH. So what if Zero Wing got some slots? It's not like they're guaranteed to complete the class change. As Shirfong led his team into the Purple Night Plaza, his 9 guildmates grew nervous. This was the first time they had encountered such a large group of experts. Of the tens of thousands of players in the plaza, all would be rare experts in a kingdom. With so many in one place, they radiated an immense pressure. Experiencing such a phenomenon would likely be rare for first-rate guilds' upper echelons. Moreover, Unyielding Soul and Starlink's members stared each other down in the center of the plaza. A chilling atmosphere lingered between the two guilds. As for Crimson Emperor, their players seemed slightly more relaxed, but although the guild was acting like a spectator, it would take action if given the opportunity. Bright Dawn, I had truly never thought that you would betray the guild to join Starlink. Just what benefits did they offer you? Unyielding Heart hissed, rage flashing in his gaze as he glared at the indifferent man beside Lu Xingluo. The indifferent man carried a bone greatsword across his back. When Shifeng saw the indifferent man, he was stunned. This man was none other than Bright Dawn, Unyielding Soul's third vice guild leader. Bright Dawn was also a Tier 2 undead knight, given the title Undead Swordsman by the Secret Pavilion. In terms of strength, Bright Dawn was on par with Unyielding Heart. He had been one of Unyielding Soul's 3 main pillars. As far as Shifeng knew, Bright Dawn hadn't betrayed Unyielding Soul in the past, yet he had done so now. This wasn't the history he remembered. In response to Unyielding Heart's question, the indifferent man revealed a calm smile and responded, "You should be fully aware of Unyielding Soul's situation. Rather than fall with the ailing Unyielding Soul, isn't it better to join the Rising Star Link? Moreover, the Starline Corporation has offered me far more than Unyielding Soul. Why don't you join me? With your fame and strength, the Starlink Corporation won't offer you any less than it has me. As for breaching your contract, the corporation will handle everything." Chapter 1889 Change in Trajectory. Chapter 1889 Change in Trajectory. At Bright Dawn's invitation, Unyielding Soul's members gasped. They finally realized why a vice guild leader like Bright Dawn would dare to betray Unyielding Soul. Tight restrictions tied every upper echelon to their guild. If an upper echelon wished to withdraw from the guild and retain their game accounts, they only had 2 choices. The first required automatic expulsion from the guild, while the second option required the upper echelon to pay a high compensation fee for breaching their contract. For a vice guild leader that had spent more than a decade with Unyielding Soul, the required compensation wouldn't be trivial. It wouldn't have been odd if Bright Dawn had even gone bankrupt after paying the compensation fee. Yet, not only had Starline Corporation foot the compensation fee, but it had even offered Bright Dawn a high salary. Including Starlink's limitless potential due to the Starline Corporation's backing, it was only natural that the guild had lured over Bright Dawn. Of course, I'm sure that you have no interest in these factors. In that case, I'll tell you about something that will definitely catch your attention. A fantasy star. Unyielding Soul will never get its hands on something like it. Why don't you give the options some consideration? Bright Dawn smiled at Unyielding Heart, who had aged past his vibrant youth. Everyone's eyes glowed as they listened to Bright Dawn's offer. Fantasy stars were a special ore that humanity had discovered during the interstellar era, and they only had one purpose. When worn, these stars would recover and retain a human's youth for a long time. Although fantasy stars couldn't extend one's lifespan, if one consumed the Green God Company's products while wearing a fantasy star, they could extend their youthful glow for another decade or 2 even without physical training. In other words, a middle-aged individual, around 40 years old, that didn't maintain their physical fitness could look like an early 20-year-old with the fantasy star's help. The fantasy star was an absolute treasure to professional gamers who relied on their youth to make their living. Although one's physical body in the real world wouldn't affect the performance of their virtual body in God's domain, their mental performance would. People past their prime generally had slower reactions than younger individuals. Even if one trained diligently to maintain their physical form, their age would, more or less, affect their mind. Needless to say, improving one's mental fortitude past one's prime was a daunting challenge. However, the fantasy star couldn't just restore one's youth. It could also maintain mental function, allowing humans to operate at their peak. Hence, the fantasy stars were extremely valuable. Not even the wealthiest individuals could afford one. Moreover, fantasy stars were incredibly rare. To purchase one needed sufficient status as well as funds. Meanwhile, the Starline Corporation just so happened to be one of the few fantasy star suppliers in the world, which meant that Bright Dawn had likely told the truth. A fantasy star? No wonder why he betrayed his old guild. After hearing about the fantasy star, Shifeng understood why Bright Dawn had turned traitor. Bright Dawn currently looked to be in his 40s, and vice guild leaders from super first-rate guilds had no need for money. However, everyone craved youth. Once he acquired a fantasy star, Bright Dawn could recover to his peak. With his abundance of combat experience and combat techniques, he could improve himself further with his recovered youth. When Mu Lingxia heard what Bright Dawn had been offered, she glanced at Unyielding Heart nervously. Not only was Unyielding Heart one of Unyielding Soul's 3 main pillars, but he was also the guild's first vice-guild leader. If Starlink poached him, it would deal a devastating blow to Unyielding Soul. So, you betrayed your brothers-in-arms for a stupid fantasy star? I was blind to think of you as a friend. From now on, I will have nothing to do with you. Unyielding Heart growled. He then glared at Lu Xinglua, who had maintained his smile, and said, Just you wait. Sooner or later, Unyielding Soul will chase you out of the Dark Knight Empire and regain its former glory. Unyielding Heart's words restored his dispirited guild members with fighting spirit. They all cheered their first vice-guild leader while ridiculing Bright Dawn. Regain your former glory? Bright Dawn could not help but laugh at Unyielding Heart and the other members of Unyielding Soul. And how will Unyielding Soul do that, exactly? Will it rely on an old fellow like you, Heart? Or the ignorant Miss Mu? Or are you going to rely on Zero Wing, your pitiful partner? Open your eyes and take a good look. Unyielding Soul is finished. The only thing holding it together is a group of useless, old bastards. We've already gathered over 50 experts who are capable of manipulating intermediate magic arrays. Unyielding Soul should give up the hope of nurturing a single traveling bard. No, to be precise, you won't even get into the Sea of Trees. After saying so, Bright Dawn raised his hand. In response, some of Starlink's members in the Purple Knight Plaza began to make their move, each holding a silver crystal ball. As these Starlink members completed an incantation, silver magic arrays began to manifest before them, releasing a bright light. A massive barrier then enveloped both Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members in the plaza. Have fun inside this barrier. It isolates everything within in a different dimension. Although this barrier requires 288 level 50-plus players to sacrifice 5 of their levels permanently, the barrier will hold every one of you for 8 hours. With that said, we'll be taking our leave now, Bright Dawn said, laughing at Unyielding Heart. He then took a key from his bag and opened a teleportation gate to the Sea of Trees. Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members could only watch as Starlink's members entered the teleportation gate and disappeared from the plaza. No matter how much they attacked the magic barrier, they couldn't damage it in the slightest. To make matters worse, the surrounding NPC soldiers were ignoring the magic barrier. Damn it! To think they had planned such a trap! Unyielding Heart cursed as he attacked the illusory magic barrier with his great sword. However, it felt as if he attacked nothing but air. The barrier didn't react as his great sword sliced through it. Currently, the magic array in the center of Dark Knight City's Purple Knight Plaza was the only path to the Sea of Trees. Unfortunately, since they were now trapped in this magic barrier, they could open a teleportation gate even if they had the keys to enter the Sea of Trees. If they were truly stuck in this barrier for 8 hours, Unyielding Soul would fall behind Starlink. Starlink's players would likely complete at least 1/3 of their class change quests by the time they were freed. How were they supposed to catch up in that case? Meanwhile, Mu Lingxia glared at the barrier before her, clearly livid. Unyielding Soul had gone to great lengths to obtain the first clear of a level 50 large-scale team dungeon in the Dark Knight Empire, allowing the guild to catch a breather. However, if Starlink monopolized all 20 of the initial traveling bard slots, Unyielding Soul would suffer unimaginable consequences. After attacking for more than 2 minutes, Unyielding Soul's members gave up. They had no other choice but to wait until the barrier faded. Sherfong, however, approached the barrier, step by step, his nonchalant expression seeming as if he were admiring the Purple Knight Plaza's view. At the same time, he pulled a magic scroll from his bag. Huh! What is he trying to do? Does he plan to test the barrier as well? It's pointless. Both our guild's experts and those from Crimson Emperor have tried everything we can think of. What could one person from Zero Wing possibly do? The plaza's occupants watched Sherfong approach the barrier in confusion, including Unyielding Soul and Mu Lingxia. They had already expended a precious Tier 4 magic scroll to attack the barrier, but they had accomplished nothing. Even if Sherfong did the same, nothing would change. When Sherfong arrived before the barrier, he activated the Summon Guard scroll in his hands. Immediately, a golden-haired beauty in sacred robes appeared beside Chiffon. Destroy this magic array! Chapter 1890 Breaking the Barrier in One Hit. Chapter 1890 Breaking the Barrier in One Hit. When the watching crowd saw the level 85 personal guard, Anna, they were dumbfounded. Destroy it? Unyielding Heart and the other Unyielding Soul members felt their anticipation melt away when they saw that Chiffon had merely summoned his personal guard. Meanwhile, Crimson Emperor's upper echelons couldn't help but laugh at the swordsman. Is that kid stupid? What is a Tier 2 NPC going to do in this situation? A woman in white robes among Crimson Emperor's members said as she shook her head. She had a tall, slender figure and radiated a mature charm. While Anna was no doubt the highest-level personal guard she had ever seen, Anna was still only Tier 2. She wasn't much different than the players trapped in the plaza. Magic arrays couldn't be destroyed simply by someone with a high level. Otherwise, a level 200, Tier 1 NPC should be just as capable of destroying a town's defensive magic array as a level 80, Tier 4 NPC. Unfortunately, that was not the case. In reality, a level 200, Tier 1 NPC would struggle to damage a defensive magic array, whereas a level 80, Tier 4 NPC would have no trouble doing so. This was the power of tiers. Not only did higher tiers provide quantitative transformations, but they also qualitatively improved one's power. This was the case for magic arrays as well. The higher ranked a magic array was, the purer its mana would be. Depending on the purity of the mana powering the magic array, the barrier could be as weak as paper or as tough as iron. Hence, Anna was only superior to Tier 2 players on a quantitative level. There was no difference in the quality of their strength. Since none of the players in the barrier had managed to deal any damage to it, Anna wouldn't be able to either. Vice Guild Leader, Starlink's trap is simply vicious. We have no choice but to sacrifice one of our players. We can have them pass the key to the guild leader to prepare another team. A level 57, Tier 2 Guardian Knight quietly suggested to the white-clad woman. The white-clad woman was none other than Illusory Words, Crimson Emperor's second vice guild leader. Illusory Words had also been recognized as one of the 10 great clerics by the secret pavilion. All right, get it done. Illusory Words nodded. There was a method to escape the magic barrier before its duration ended, although players wouldn't use this method unless absolutely necessary. That method was death. When players died, they'd automatically resurrect in the nearest graveyards half an hour after their death. While doing so would allow players to escape the barrier, it would cost a level. However, the current situation did not allow for such concerns. It was better to have one player die and get the key to their guild leader within 30 minutes than waste 8 hours in the plaza. Their guild leader could organize another team to enter the Sea of Trees while the player waited for resurrection. If they got lucky, they might claim 2 or 3 traveling bard spots. At the very least, it'd be better than nothing at all. As Crimson Emperor's members prepared to enact their plan, Anna finished chanting her incantation and writing the series of divine runes. Immediately, a golden magic array formed above the plaza, and a level 85 Valkyrie with pure white wings descended before the trapped players. The Tier 4 Valkyrie's aura was so intense that it felt stifling to the players in the plaza. A Tier 4 Valkyrie? When Illusory Words saw the white-winged Valkyrie hovering in the air, she could not help but turn to Shifeng's cloaked figure. Could he be Black Flame? A lot happened in God's domain each day, and a new power or rising expert practically emerged with each sunrise. Not even she, one of Crimson Emperor's vice guild leaders, could remember each of these powers and experts, but she had a clear impression of the Tier 4 Valkyrie. After all, the Tier 4 Valkyrie was a considerable threat to any superpower. With a slight flap of her wings, a storm brewed, and the Valkyrie vanished. By the time she reappeared, she hovered before the illusory barrier. The Valkyrie then thrust her sacred thunder spear at the semi-translucent wall. Boom! With a deafening explosion, countless arcs of lightning crashed into the magic barrier. The barrier began to tremble. Despite the assault of so many players earlier, the barrier hadn't reacted in the slightest. yet just one of the Valkyrie's attacks was enough to shake it. What power! Illusory Words watched with slight surprise. The barrier hadn't even reacted when Unyielding Heart had attacked with a Tier 4 magic scroll, but now, the Valkyrie's attack had deformed the barrier. One could easily imagine how powerful the Valkyrie's attack was. However, as the lightning began to fade, the magic barrier stilled. A second later, the barrier recovered to its original state as if it hadn't been attacked at all. Even that wasn't enough? Unyielding Heart's expression soured as the magic barrier recovered. While it was true that the Valkyrie's attack had been effective, it was clear that the strike had only depleted a small portion of the magic barrier's energy reserves. It would take a considerable amount of time for the Valkyrie to destroy the barrier. Unfortunately, he was somewhat familiar with Shifeng's Valkyrie. He knew that it could only remain for a short time. Most likely, the Valkyrie would not be able to deplete the magic barrier's energy reserves before her duration ran out. This left them with only the option of escaping by death. Although he knew it would be meaningless. Players that could manipulate intermediate magic arrays would have a 20% higher chance of completing their class change. Even if Unyielding Soul formed another team, locating Tier 1, intermediate magician experts would be impossible. Intermediate magician experts were extremely rare, and he had already gathered everyone his guild had here. Even if the guild organized another team to enter the Sea of Trees, if Unyielding Soul's members were 30 minutes late and had a lower success rate, how could they compete with Starlink? Of course, they could sacrifice the intermediate magician experts with him. It would give them a better chance of competing, but that plan left another issue. Would players resurrect inside the magic barrier after they died? If players resurrected inside the barrier instead of the nearest graveyard after the 30-minute wait had passed, they'd sacrifice a level for nothing. Is there no choice but to risk it? Unyielding Heart gritted his teeth as he considered the option. As Unyielding Heart contemplated, the Valkyrie ready to throw her Sacred Thunder Spear at the magic barrier. However, the surrounding crowd had already given up hope. Since the previous attack had failed, this one shouldn't fare any better. However, Shifeng, who had remained still earlier, suddenly activated Heavenly Dragon's power, his aura's intensity instantly skyrocketing. He then slashed at the barrier with Killing Ray. Lightning Slash! The Valkyrie threw her Sacred Thunder Spear at the same moment. Two streaks of light, one blue and one gold, collided at a single point on the magic barrier as one. Boom! With another explosion, the two streaks of light shot through the barrier. Following which, the crowd heard the sound of cracking glass. Cracks then began to web themselves across the illusory barrier. Pun! A moment later, the blue sky returned above the players' heads. How is this possible? The barrier shattered? What did he do? Both Unyielding Soul's Unyielding Heart and Crimson Emperor's Illusory Words gave Shifeng incredulous looks. Chapter 1891 Another Method Dark Knight City, Purple Knight Plaza. Chapter 1891 Another Method Dark Knight City, Purple Knight Plaza. As the barrier disappeared, silence filled the entire plaza, and every player that had been trapped behind the barrier turned to stare at Shifeng. So strong! Didn't the barrier just shake a little after the Valkyrie's attack? How did he straight up destroy the barrier? Whether it was the spectating players outside of the plaza or the two super first-rate guilds members within, all looked at Shifeng with incredulous expressions. The expert players Starlink had stationed to observe the situation from outside of the plaza stared at the scene with bulging eyes. They had only formed the illusory spatial barrier after sacrificing 288 players to the magic array, yet Shifeng had shattered it without much effort. The illusory spatial barrier had been formed with a set of special magic tools the guild had found in ancient ruins. Starlink had exhausted a lot of time and resources to explore the various ruins, and by the time the guild had completed the required set to form the magic array, the guild had suffered over 5,000 casualties, all of which had been elite or expert players. Once the illusory spatial barrier had been activated, not even a Tier 4 monster should be able to escape. The Tier 4 monster would have no choice but to wait through the barrier's 8-hour duration. Moreover, even if players died inside the barrier, They would resurrect within it instead of in the nearest graveyard. Yet Shifeng had shattered the barrier in one hit. While everyone was still shocked, Shifeng sheathed Killing Ray and turned to Unyielding Heart and his companions. The magic array has been dealt with. Let's hurry to the Sea of Trees, Shifeng said as he gestured to the magic array in the heart of the Purple Night Plaza. Calmly, he continued, "It hasn't been long since Starlink's members left. We should be able to catch up if we hurry." Hearing Shifeng's reminder, Unyielding Heart and Mu Lingsha quickly snapped out of their daze and gave the swordsmen grateful looks. If Shifeng hadn't shattered the magic barrier, they wouldn't have been able to compete with Starlink. Immediately, Unyielding Heart took a key from his bag and activated the teleportation gate to the Sea of Trees. Mu Lingsha then directed their experts to enter the teleportation gate. Meanwhile, Illusory Words couldn't pull her gaze from Shifeng, astonishment filling her eyes. Strength combination? When Illusory Words recalled the attack Shifeng had executed with the Valkyrie, a playful smile graced her lips. "It seems that Black Flame is far more capable than I thought. It's no wonder why the secret pavilion has such a high evaluation of him." The Valkyrie's strength hadn't been quite high enough to shatter the illusory spatial barrier alone. Shifeng had actually combined his strength with the Valkyrie's to compensate. Executing the strength combination technique with another individual was many times more difficult than using it alone. One's grasp of timing and positioning had to be extremely accurate. It wasn't a casual feat to accomplish. Yet Shifeng had smoothly executed the technique, which even domain realm experts found challenging. Although Shifeng hadn't combined his full strength with the Valkyries, it had been enough to exceed the magic barrier's limit. Thus, the magic barrier had shattered. "Vice Guild Leader, the magic barrier is gone. Let's hurry as well," a tall, muscular berserker said. "All right. Activate the teleportation gate." Illusory Words nodded. She then directed her selected players into the teleportation gate. Following which, white light enveloped Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members, one after another, as the players teleported to the Sea of Trees. While Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members left for the Sea of Trees, the observing Starlink members hurriedly reported to Lu Xinghua and Bright Dawn. "What did you say? Unyielding Soul broke through the illusory spatial barrier?" When Bright Dawn heard his subordinate's report, his mind instinctively wanted to reject the notion. "That's impossible. Not even Tier 4 monsters can break out of the barrier. I know full well what Unyielding Soul is capable of. They definitely don't have the power to destroy the illusory spatial barrier." As Unyielding Soul's ex-vice guild leader, he was fully aware of the guild's current prowess. He even knew the guild's trump cards. At best, the guild could expend 5 Tier 4 offensive magic scrolls, which wouldn't be enough to destroy the illusory spatial barrier. The illusory spatial barrier really shattered, but Unyielding Soul's members didn't do it, the reporting assassin said. "Not Unyielding Soul's members? Was it Crimson Emperor?" Bright Dawn's expression darkened. "It seems that I've underestimated Illusory Words, to think that she had such card hidden." While the illusory spatial barrier could be broken, doing so required immense power. One would need enough power to destroy a town's defensive magic array in one hit, and players had no chances of encountering such power at this stage of the game. However, God's domain had countless opportunities to offer. With how widespread a superpower's influence was, it wasn't impossible to acquire a tool with enough destructive power. No, it wasn't Crimson Emperor's members either. Based on our information, one of Zero Wing's members destroyed the barrier, the assassin said as he sent an image of Shifeng to Bright Dawn. "Zero Wing?" Bright Dawn blinked in surprise as he looked at Shifeng's cloaked figure and the sacred sword in the swordsman's hand. When Lu Xinghua heard the report, he was surprised as well. He had never thought that Zero Wing actually had a means to destroy the illusory spatial barrier. "It seems that Zero Wing isn't all talk after all. It's no wonder why Unyielding Soul agreed to share some of its profits with the guild," Lu Xinghua said, chuckling. "Unfortunately, even if they get into the Sea of Trees, it's too late. Starlink will claim the first 20 slots. Not long ago, they had learned that not only could a limited number of players class change to the Traveling Bard class, but the quest only accepted a limited number of applicants as well. Only 300 slots would be available once every 2 hours. Each application also cost 60 gold. Although the price was high, it wasn't much to Starlink. In the end, they had spent 18,000 gold to purchase all 300 slots, sending 50-plus intermediate magician experts to attempt the quest. The guild then gave the remaining 240 or so slots to WH-equipped Tier 1 experts. As Lu Xinglua and his companions, who didn't plan on challenging the class change quest, were about to leave to explore the Sea of Trees city, Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members finally made their appearance, arriving in the temple that served as the venue for the Traveling Bard class change quest. Damn it! Why does the quest have this restriction too? Unyielding Hearts gave the female elf clerk a grim expression after receiving her reply. They had just broken through the barrier with great difficulty, yet they had been told that there were no applicant slots remaining. They'd have to wait another 2 hours before they could attempt the quest. Unyielding Heart felt as if the system were playing some cruel joke. Illusory Words wore a similarly ugly expression. She hadn't expected the restriction either. Sure enough, there are no more slots available. Shifeng could not help but sigh as he looked toward Lu Xinglua and his group, who stood a short distance away. Well, I didn't plan for them to take the normal class change quest, anyway. Following which, Shifeng switched his title to Demon Hunter and approached the exchange counter beside the registration counter. There was more than one way to obtain the Traveling Bard class. The first was the normal method, but the second required purchasing a trial emblem and taking part in the original class change trial the primordial elf kings had left behind. However, the trial emblem wasn't easy to purchase. One needed to be a noble of the Sea of Trees to gain access. Other players would have to complete a long string of quests to become a noble in this city, but Shifeng, who had the Demon Hunter title, didn't. Players with the Demon Hunter title were considered world nobles, so Shifeng would be viewed as a noble in an NPC city like the Sea of Trees. Lord Demon Hunter, how may I be of service? The NPC elf asked, smiling brightly. Here, we can provide a trial emblem that will allow you to take part in the trial the primordial elf kings had left behind for us. If you pass this trial, you'll become a valiant traveling bard. I wish to purchase 9 trial emblems, Shifeng answered. Chapter 1892 Complete Legacy. Trial Emblem? Chapter 1892 Complete Legacy. Trial Emblem? How did he just trade with that NPC? Didn't she refuse to trade with us a moment ago? When Lu Xinglua and the others heard the female elf's words, they were stunned. When they had visited the Elven Temple, they had spoken with its NPCs. After asking around, they had verified that only 300 players could attempt the class change quest every 2 hours. They had tried to speak with the female elf at the exchange counter as well, but she had ignored their questions, stating that she'd only deal with people of noble status or higher, yet she treated Shifeng with such respect. Moreover, she had taken the initiative to introduce Shifeng to the products she offered. There's still such a method? Unyielding Heart and his companions watched Shifeng purchase trial emblems with glowing eyes. They had never expected Shifeng to have such access to the class change quest. So, this is Zero Wing Sword King? Shifeng's display greatly surprised Illusory Words. The only guilds with the Sea of Trees teleportation key were Starlink, Unyielding Soul, and Crimson Emperor. Hence, one could say that their guilds were the most familiar with the Sea of Trees. However, based on Shifeng's performance thus far, it was obvious that he knew even more about the Sea of Trees than they did. In fact, he even possessed a special status in the Sea of Trees. As the crowd watched, Shifeng spent 450 gold to purchase 9 trial emblems. He then handed the emblems to the 9 Zero-Wing members he had brought with him. Purchasing a trial emblem was the same as applying for the class change quest. Only, this method was 10 gold cheaper. Using the trial emblems when attempting the quest also granted 2 difficulty modes to choose from, normal mode and hard mode. Normal mode was no different than the class change quest without the emblem, but if players chose hard mode, they'd be sent to a different trial. However, if players chose to challenge hard mode, they would be sent to a different trial. Furthermore, unlike the normal mode quest, which only 20 players could complete each week, hard mode didn't have such a limit. As long as one had access to the trial emblems and could afford them, they could enable as many players to become traveling bards as they wanted. The hard mode quest had been Shifeng's goal since the very beginning. Players could only acquire the complete traveling bard legacy the primordial elf kings had left behind, becoming true traveling bards, by completing the hard mode class change quest. If players only completed the normal mode quest, they would only acquire a portion of the legacy, becoming a pseudo-tier 2 player. However, the hard mode quest was incredibly difficult to clear, even more challenging than normal tier 2 promotion quests. The hard mode quest was the equivalent of the tier 2 hell mode promotion quest. Unless one's combat and equipment standards had reached a certain level, challenging the class change quest would only lead to failure. If a player failed the quest, they'd have to wait a while before they could challenge it again. Hence, every player Aqua Rose had selected for this class change was an expert capable of reaching the Trial Tower's 7th floor. In addition, all 9 were intermediate magicians, and among these 9 players, 5 had been well-known tier 4 experts in the past. However, since they had merely been independent players, their access to resources had been limited. Even though they had been members of well-known adventurer teams, they had lacked the resources to reach tier 5. The remaining 4 had been experts in first-rate guilds. Even the weakest among them had reached tier 4 in the past, and the strongest, Happy Wind, had been a tier 5 traveling bard. Naturally, things had changed in this life, and all 9 of these players had joined Zero Wing. With these 9 players' combat standards, their chances of completing the hard mode quest should have been quite low, but Aqua Rose had given each of them a primordial soul before they had come to the Sea of Trees. With the increased physique the primordial soul granted, these 9 should have a much higher chance of completing the hard mode quest. As Shifeng distributed the trial emblems to his players, Unyielding Soul's group approached him. "Guild leader Black Flame, can I trouble you to help us purchase some trial emblems as well? I will buy them at a 50% markup. Of course, if that is not enough, I can increase the price," Unyielding Heart offered, feeling slightly embarrassed. Originally, Zero Wing had tried to purchase class change slots from Unyielding Soul, which, in turn, had increased the competition Unyielding Soul faced. Now, however, Unyielding Soul approached Zero Wing for the same, increasing Zero Wing's competition. This put Unyielding Heart in a bind. Long Soul and Hunting Blade, who stood beside Unyielding Heart, felt ashamed as they considered their earlier attitude towards Zero Wing. They had assumed that Zero Wing had taken advantage of their guild, but now, it seemed that Zero Wing would become Unyielding Soul's benefactor. It was only thanks to Zero Wing that their guild had overcome the incident in the Purple Night Plaza. Now, they had to rely on Zero Wing once more to gain access to the class change quest. If not for Zero Wing, they would have had no hope of competing with Starlink. "Sure enough, you really are guild leader Black Flame. Hello, I am Illusory Words of Crimson Emperor. On behalf of Crimson Emperor, I wish to seek your help in purchasing trial emblems. I am willing to offer double the original price. May I know if you are willing to lend me your aid?" Illusory Words asked gently as she approached Shifeng. Everyone was stunned as they watched the vice guild leaders of 2 super first-rate guilds approach Shifeng for help. If the public found out about this, they'd be shocked. "Our guild leader is so amazing! Even superpowers are asking him for help. That's only natural. That's Zero Wing's guild leader we're talking about. Quick, look at the stupid faces Starlink's members are making." The 9 Zero Wing members that had obtained the trial emblem chatted about their guild leader, reverence flashing in their eyes as they looked at Shifeng. Before they had joined Zero Wing, even first-rate guilds had been colossal existences in their eyes, let alone super first-rate guilds. Super first-rate guilds were the virtual gaming world's overlords, yet 2 such guilds wanted their guild's help. This was simply unbelievable. "That won't be a problem. Let's forget about the price markup. Instead, I hope that your 2 guilds can help with a problem of mine," Shifeng said, chuckling as he looked at Unyielding Heart and Illusory Words. "Help? Both vice guild leaders gave Sherfone confused looks. They had brought with them a lot of players to attempt the class change quest. In total, both had a little over 1,000 players. Even with a 50% price markup, Sherfone could earn over 25,000 gold instantly, a huge sum for a first-rate guild. If Sherfone charged a slightly higher price, he would even have enough money to build a town. Yet Sherfone only wanted their assistance. "That's right, I need your 2 guilds to help me with something. In return, I'll help you buy as many trial emblems as you want." Sherfone nodded. There was no limit on the number of trial emblems one could purchase. It was a privilege for the Sea of Trees nobles, allowing them to skip the queue and granting a small discount when applying for the class change quest. There was nothing special about it. Moreover, even with the trial emblems, either of these guilds would become a competitor for Zero Wing. After all, the hard mode quest was Zero Wing's target. It didn't have to worry about any competition. "May I know what kind of help guild leader Black Flame requires?" Illusory Words asked. Although the traveling bard class was valuable, if Sherfang's request threatened her guild's foundations, she had to refuse. "Right, you can't consider your decision properly if I don't tell you the details. To put it simply, I'd like to borrow 200 Tier 2 experts from each of your guilds. What are your thoughts on this?" Sherfone explained. Chapter 1893 Age-Old Secret. Borrow Tier 2 experts? Chapter 1893 Age-Old Secret. Borrow Tier 2 experts? Unyielding Heart and Illusory Words stared at Sherfone in confusion, unable to fathom why Sherfone would need so many experts. At this stage of the game, Tier 2 experts were still quite rare in God's domain. Even a first-rate guild would only have around 30 to 50 Tier 2 players, yet Sherfone wanted their guilds to lend him 200 Tier 2 experts each. This was close to half of the Tier 2 experts in their guilds. Such a large number of Tier 2 experts would be far too many to raid a team dungeon. The largest team dungeon at this stage of the game could only accommodate 200 players, yet Sherfone wanted 400. Furthermore, Zero Wing had its own Tier 2 experts. "That's right, I want to raid a field boss, but I currently lack manpower," Sherfone said, nodding. "Of course, Zero Wing will compensate for any deaths incurred during the expedition. May I know your opinions on this?" He might earn 30,000 gold or so if he resold the trial emblems to the 2 guilds at a markup, but 30,000 gold was not enough to change Zero Wing's situation. Besides, Zero Wing's financial need wasn't limited to the money required for Silverwing Town's upgrade. The guild also had to pay back the loan for the airport. In total, Zero Wing needed 500,000 gold. It was a significant sum, even for a superpower. Most importantly, Zero Wing wasn't as off as everyone thought. While it was true that Zero Wing's members were improving their equipment and leveling rapidly thanks to the guild's expansion into the Ore Empire's southeastern area, there was a saying, "The nail that sticks out gets hammered down." Now that Zero Wing had secured a large fraction of the Ore Empire's benefits, the various superpowers watched the guild closely. The only reason they had not taken any actions was Zero Wing's war weapons and teleportation abilities. However, now that Blackwater had opened the Ore capital city's armory, it was only a matter of time before the various superpowers obtained a large number of war weapons or designs for them. If Zero Wing did not take any preventive measures now, the guild would suffer later on. Meanwhile, Sherfone had been nursing a headache over the last few days while trying to figure out a solution to this problem. Fortunately, an opportunity had just presented itself. He had planned to wait until Zero Wing had 1,000 Tier 2 experts before initiating the next step of his plan, but it seemed that he wouldn't have to wait that long. If he had the help of these 2 super first-rate guilds Tier 2 experts, he could definitely defeat the Void Serpent, a level 60 world boss. Although world bosses seemed like ordinary field bosses, they possessed a unique domain that prevented players from using external tools. Players had to rely on their own strength to face these world bosses. Hence, raiding world bosses was far more difficult than field bosses of the same rank and level. However, due to the extremely high raid difficulty, every world boss dropped impressive loot. World bosses also dropped some unique materials. Because of this, God's domain's countless powers had constantly challenged world bosses in his previous life. Guilds had still raided level 70 or 80 world bosses after players had reached level 200. Shifeng's interest in slaying the Void Serpent wasn't only because of its loot. The Void Serpent also held a secret that Shifeng wanted. Only with the Void Serpent's blood could players activate the greatest secret the Witch's Hill had hidden for several centuries: the Otherworld Gate. The Void Serpent was in a secret, underground temple in the Witch's Hill, and since the map was so large, locating the underground temple was quite difficult. The fact that the Witch's Hill was so far from civilization only made the temple even more difficult to find. As a result, the Void Serpent had remained hidden even after mainstream players had reached level 100 in Shifeng's past. Players had only learned of the Void Serpent after a party exploring the Witch's Hill had discovered the world boss. After news of the creature had gone public, guild teams had rushed to the underground temple to kill the Void Serpent. They then discovered the Witch's Hill's secret. Although the Otherworld Gate had been activated relatively late in the past, the various powers had still treated it like a priceless treasure. Within the Otherworld Gate, players had discovered an abundance of rare, precious materials, all of which were difficult to acquire in Starmoon Kingdom. Among the most notable materials was Void Silver. Void Silver was no less valuable than Mana Stone. Not only could it strengthen weapons and equipment, but it could also increase production success rates for forgers, engineers, enchanters, and alchemists by a large margin. The Otherworld Gate was also a good place to acquire level 50 plus top-tier weapons and equipment for independent players. Hence, the Witch's Hill had instantly become Starmoon Kingdom's focus. If Shifeng could activate the Otherworld Gate now, Zero Wing City, which occupied the Witch's Hill, would become the most popular city in Starmoon Kingdom. Not only could Zero Wing rake in a fortune, but it could also acquire tons of rare materials, allowing the guild to grow rapidly. He had wanted to raid the Void Serpent for a while, but unfortunately, Zero Wing lacked the strength to do so. A world boss was not an easy raid, and he didn't have a quest to take advantage of, drastically weakening the Void Serpent as he had with the Flame Demon King. If he wanted to raid the Void Serpent, he'd need at least 1,000 Tier 2 players. Meanwhile, after pondering on Shifeng's suggestion for a short moment, both Unyielding Heart and Illusory Words nodded. "All right, I'll agree to your proposal on Unyielding Soul's behalf," Unyielding Heart said. Although he did not know what Shifeng wanted with so many Tier 2 players, saving over 10,000 gold by lending the swordsman 200 experts to raid a boss was a worthwhile transaction. "May I know when Guild Leader Black Flame needs our players?" Illusory Words asked. "Naturally, the sooner, the better," Shifeng said. "My side will need some time to gather the necessary manpower. After all, many of our Tier 2 experts are either questing or raiding dungeons right now. I'll need a little over a day to gather 200 Tier 2 experts, so can we gather in 2 days? Illusory Words proposed a time after giving the matter some thought. "That won't be a problem. I need to see to certain preparations as well," Shifeng replied, nodding. In truth, even if Illusory Words hadn't suggested it, he'd still need 1 or 2 days to prepare. "Since both of you have agreed to the arrangement, let's establish a contract." Following which, Shifeng signed a contract with Unyielding Heart and Illusory Words. In exchange for helping the two guilds purchase 1,000 trial emblems in total, each of the guilds would send 200 Tier 2 experts to help Shifeng hunt a boss. Once the contract had been signed, the two guilds handed Shifeng the coins to purchase the trial emblems. When Unyielding Heart and Illusory Words had the emblems in hand, they turned to distribute them to their respective guild members. These players then activated their trial emblems and teleported to the legacy grounds. While the exchange between Shifeng and the two super first-rate guilds seemed cumbersome, they had completed the entire process in less than 5 minutes. It wasn't enough time to provide Starlink any noticeable advantage. Moreover, to the two super first-rate guilds' surprise, they had the option of choosing the quest's difficulty, and hard mode didn't have a slot limit. However, the two guilds sent the majority of their experts into normal mode to increase their chances of success. They only sent a small number of experts to test the hard mode quest. Suddenly, 1,000 players vanished from the lively hall, stunning Lu Xinglua and the other nearby Starlink members. How is this possible? They ignored the application limit? Lu Xingluo's expression darkened as he watched Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members disappear. He then turned to Shifeng, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Black Flame. You dare to ruin my plans once again? Do you really think that I won't strike at Zero Wing just because you managed to partner with Unyielding Soul? 1,000 players. If these players participated in the class change quest, it would severely affect Starlink's performance. However, Shifeng paid no attention to the killing intent Lu Xinglua directed at him. He simply glanced at the man before leaving the temple and heading for the city hall. They were in the Sea of Trees. If Lu Xinglua and his companions wanted to attack him here, they'd suffer the consequences, not him. Chapter 1894 City of Foreign Races. Chapter 1894 City of Foreign Races. The Sea of Trees was located in a secret land the primordial elf kings had created. A forest enveloped the city, and unlike Dark Night City, which was populated by tall buildings, this city was crowded with towering trees. Every tree pierced the clouds like a skyscraper. Houses had been built within the gigantic trees, and thick vines connected one tree to the next. Currently, Shifeng rode his mount down the spacious roads made of vines. When he looked down, he gazed at a sea of clouds below him. Since the Sea of Trees hadn't been fully unlocked, most of the people wandering on the streets were NPCs. Aside from the 3 Superpowers members, who had begun to explore the city, Shifeng didn't spot a single player. Sheltered by the 6 great primordial elf kings, the Sea of Trees had a long history. Most of the NPCs living here were elves, although some were NPC merchants from other races. Human NPCs only made up a small majority of the city's residents. Meanwhile, the weakest soldiers patrolling the city were level 180, Tier 1 NPCs. There were well-equipped Tier 2 soldiers as well. Each patrol squad was led by a level 200, Tier 3 knight. However, these soldiers' levels and tiers weren't their most eye-catching aspects. All of these soldiers wore ancient equipment engraved with advanced battle arrays. When the advanced battle array activated, the Tier 2 soldiers could even take down Tier 4 players. The patrol captain's equipment sported master battle arrays. With these patrol captains protecting the city, not even Tier 5 players would last long if they tried to cause trouble. According to the legends, the primordial elf kings had also left behind immortal guardians to protect their Sea of Trees. Although these immortal guardians were not Tier 6 existences, they had the combat power to face gods. If a Tier 6 player entered the city, the secret land would forcibly suppress them to Tier 5. Hence, on the continent of God's domain, the Sea of Trees' security was even superior to Blackwing cities. During Shifeng's previous life, Tier 5 and Tier 6 players had frequently caused trouble in NPC cities, but none had dared to do so in the Sea of Trees. This was also the reason that the Sea of Trees had become the most well-known NPC city in God's domain, attracting tons of normal and neutral players. These players didn't have to worry about their safety while inside the city. After roughly 20 minutes, Shifeng arrived before the largest, oldest tree in the city. This primordial tree was both the Sea of Trees City Hall and the city's heart. There are so many foreign race merchants here already? As Shifeng approached the city's central district, he noticed many NPC merchants hawking their wares alongside the road. These merchants all sold rare goods such as magic scrolls, potions, materials, tomes, engineering tools, weapons, equipment, etc. The sight was dazzling. The 3 Superpowers members, who had arrived before him, browsed the goods with sparkling eyes. They could easily make a fortune by reselling these items, especially the magic scrolls, weapons, equipment, and rare materials. Some merchants even offered Tier 2 magic scrolls and level 50 dark gold equipment. Only the items' prices were far higher than market value. However, the Superpowers members weren't fools. Rather than purchasing any of these items, they first investigated every NPC merchant's goods. They then proceeded to survey the central district, empty lands, and establishments, compiling the information to allow their companions in the city hall to make the best decision when purchasing the city's lands for their guilds. When Shifeng stepped into the city hall, the merchant players that represented the superpowers had already busied themselves with researching the lands and shops, carefully selecting which to purchase. Naturally, the three superpowers had sent these merchant players since they were more adept with business negotiations than the guild's upper echelons. Moreover, the merchant subclass allowed them to bargain for discounts and learn more from NPCs. But despite their expertise, these merchant players had headaches as they selected lands for their guilds. The Sea of Trees lands were just so expensive. Even the ordinary lands in the city's outer area cost between 7,000 gold and 15,000 gold, whereas lands in the city's inner area cost between 12,000 gold and 30,000 gold. The cheapest plot of land in the central district cost 50,000 gold, while the more expensive options cost over 100,000. Even superpowers at this stage of the game couldn't afford to purchase the Sea of Trees lands casually, but that wasn't the most important issue. To purchase the Central District's lands, one needed sufficient status and reputation. For the moment, they could only purchase the lands in the city's outer and inner areas, but since there were so many to choose from, they couldn't make a proper decision without further understanding of the city's layout. "Lord Demon Hunter, how may I be of service today?" A male elf in a suit and tie asked gracefully as he approached Shifeng. "I wish to see some of the city's hotels and restaurants for rent," Shifeng said. "All right, please follow me." The male elf bowed before leading Shifeng to a VIP reception room. As the elf led Shifeng to a reception room, the three superpowers representatives watched him leave the main lobby with astonished expressions. "What's going on? How did he get an invite to a VIP room? We've already bought 2 plots of land and earned quite a few contribution points, yet we haven't earned such treatment. Clearly, he's an idiot. He's actually trying to rent hotels and restaurants instead of purchasing lands. What benefit could he earn by doing so? They won't be profitable in the least." Many of the merchant players watched enviously as Shifeng was led to a VIP reception room, but the man's statement had also confused them. When players gained access to a VIP reception room, they also gained access to better benefits. Aside from refreshments and privacy, players would also be offered lands, which weren't usually available to the public, for purchase. Moreover, every one of those lands would be worth their price or more. In contrast, the lands offered in the lobby varied. Not every plot would be worth its selling price, and whether players made a profit or not would rely on them. Meanwhile, in the VIP reception room, the elf administrator quickly prepared a list for Shifeng. "Lord Demon Hunter, here are the hotels and restaurants that are available for rent. However, these hotels and restaurants are located in the city's outer and inner areas. You will need 10,000 contribution points to rent those in the central district," the elf administrator explained. "I understand." Shifeng nodded. He then lifted the stack of paper to inspect. Naturally, setting up a trading firm in a trade city like the Sea of Trees would generate a lot of profit. Aside from selling products, the shops could also serve as a warehouse for all kinds of precious materials and items that flowed into the city. However, unlike ordinary NPC cities, the Sea of Trees was slightly unique since it occupied a secret land. The Sea of Trees was similar to the holy city of Titan in that players could not remain in the city long term. Once the sun set, players that hadn't rented a hotel room or purchased a private house would be automatically teleported out of the Sea of Trees. Furthermore, getting into the city wasn't an easy task. Even once the Sea of Trees had been fully unlocked, players would still need to expend a lot of effort to visit the city, especially ordinary and elite players. Unfortunately, purchasing a private house in the city was out of the question for most players. Not even large guilds' upper echelons could necessarily afford a private house here. Purchasing a private house in this city was even more expensive than setting up a shop. Most importantly, players needed a very high status and a ton of reputation points to buy one. Even expert players would need to quest in the Sea of Trees for a very long time to fulfill these requirements. Aside from private houses, players could stay in hotels or advanced restaurants. Of course, since shops had living spaces for players, they could own a shop as well. Only, shops accommodated far fewer players than private houses. But how could many players afford shops just for the living space? As a result, the only options remaining were hotels and advanced restaurants. Needless to say, staying in these establishments was also quite expensive. Depending on the environment, accommodation fees could range from 50 silver to 5 gold per day. Even elite players would feel a sting from these prices. Meanwhile, if players rented the whole hotel or advanced restaurant, they would earn 20% of the profits. While the Sea of Trees was in its early stages, this was the best way to earn money. Moreover, renting these establishments cost far less than purchasing them directly. After reading through the list, Sherfone quickly set his sights on a few hotels and restaurants that had been particularly popular during his previous life. However, when Sherfone reached the final page and saw the small restaurant listed, he was stunned. What? Even this restaurant is available for rent? Chapter 1895 Epic Shop. Chapter 1895 Epic Shop. Sherfeng's eyes widened as he saw the name. Forest Traveler. Surprise and ecstasy overcoming him. In the current Sea of Trees, the Forest Traveler was an unassuming restaurant located in the city's outer area. The restaurant had only 2 floors. The first was the dining hall, and the second was used for accommodations. The restaurant was ordinary, and nothing about it stood out. However, when the Sea of Trees' third seal had been lifted in the past, players had discovered the restaurant's unique quality. Since so many players had crowded the Sea of Trees back then, both hotels and restaurants' guest rooms had been full. Naturally, many players instantly targeted the cheap accommodations that small restaurants like the Forest Traveler offered. Once the third seal had lifted, the Forest Traveler revealed a package that included both room and board, available exclusively for the restaurant's few high-class guest rooms. As the high-class guest rooms could only be rented by purchasing this combo pack, players had no choice but to dine there as well. The Forest Traveler had become instantly famous after players had tried the provided meal, which granted a special buff called Forest Blessing. The Forest Blessing buff granted players anywhere from 5 to 20 points in luck for 18 hours. The buff could only be gained once every 2 days. Although luck was somewhat illusory in God's domain, it had a subtle effect on players. For example, luck would affect loot from opening treasure chests and killing monsters. It would also affect one's production success rate. Hence, on the market, ornaments that added even 3 to 5 points of luck cost a fortune. Such ornaments would never become obsolete. In the past, the various large guilds had desperately stockpiled items that added luck. A single extra point in luck could be enough to gain a top-tier item. Since luck items were so precious to both independent players and guilds, such items had rarely appeared on the market. One could easily imagine how attractive a meal that increased luck would be to independent and guild players. Even Sherfong had often visited the Forest Traveler for a meal in the past, especially before he raided a large-scale team dungeon. The only downside was the buff's long cooldown. Even after the Forest Traveler had expanded its shop front, players had to deal with a 7 to 8 hour queue to get a seat. The Forest Traveler had ranked as one of the top 100 epic shops in God's domain in its heyday. The Secret Pavilion managed the ranking system, and a shop's rank depended on demand for and rarity of its services. Since the Forest Traveler had revealed itself to him, why wouldn't Sherfong be surprised and excited? However, when Sherfong saw the restaurant's rental price, his eyebrows twitched. Is this a robbery? Sherfong couldn't help but wonder. Normally, the Sea of Trees hotels and restaurants demanded per week or per month rent, but the Forest Traveler had to be paid by the year. Moreover, renting the restaurant for a single year cost 60,000 gold. Even the larger advanced restaurants only cost 4,000 gold per month, yet the Forest Traveler's rent cost 5,000 gold per month. Moreover, the system demanded a full year up front. It was half of the funds Sherfong had on hand right now. With 60,000 gold, he could rent over a dozen hotels and restaurants. Should I set it aside for now and rent it during my next visit? Sherfong fell into deep thought as he looked at the Forest Traveler's information. Competition would be at its fiercest during the first month after the Sea of Trees had activated. It was also the best time to secure an advantage. As long as players rented one of the Sea of Trees establishments, they could continue to renew their lease. Unless players gave up their right to renew the lease, other players wouldn't have an opportunity to claim the establishment. However, if he rented the Forest Traveler now, he wouldn't have much left to rent other restaurants and hotels, but he had no guarantee that the three superpowers wouldn't discover these hotels and restaurants' importance before his next visit. If the superpowers had already realized these establishments' value, he'd have a far more difficult time renting a large number of them later. Fortunately, he didn't have to worry about losing the Forest Traveler since only he knew the restaurant's secret right now. Furthermore, 60,000 gold was a huge sum to a superpower, as well. None of them would be willing to spend so much gold for a modest restaurant like the Forest Traveler. Lord Demon Hunter, I recommend the hotels and restaurants on the last page. Many customers favor those establishments in particular. I cannot guarantee that these establishments will be available during your next visit, the elf administrator said, flashing Sherfong a cunning smile when he noticed the swordsman stare tentatively at the list's final page. Sherfong rolled his eyes at the elf administrator. The administrator's comment made one thing clear. He would either have to give up on the Forest Traveler or give up on renting another dozen or so hotels and restaurants. Both options would rob Sherfong of profits. I'm interested in renting this Forest Traveler, but why must it only be rented by the year? Can it not be rented on a monthly basis? Sherfong asked as he gestured to the Forest Traveler's information on the list. He wanted to see if the system would grant him any other options. The Forest Traveler? The elf administrator repositioned his glasses as he took a look at the list. Smiling, he explained, "This restaurant has encountered some operational problems and urgently needs funding. That is why the owner had decided to rent the restaurant. We have suggested that the owner accept a monthly rent, but the owner is adamant about his decision. Due to your status, Lord Demon Hunter, the city is willing to help you negotiate altered conditions with the owner. However, each negotiation will cost a 1,000 gold fee. May I know if you wish to open negotiations? 1,000 gold per negotiation?" The corners of Sherfang's mouth twitched. Sherfong was no stranger to negotiations. This was the precise reason that the three superpowers had sent their merchant players to purchase the city's lands, not their upper echelons. The higher ranked a merchant player was, the more ability they'd have to reduce an item's price. Some merchant players could even negotiate for price cuts by offering NPCs favorable conditions. However, this was the first time Sherfong had encountered a 1,000 gold negotiation fee. That's right. As a noble in our city, you have the right to 3 negotiation attempts. Of course, the city cannot guarantee the negotiation's results, the elf administrator explained. All right, let's open the negotiations then. Sherfong sighed as he took 1,000 gold from his bag. After receiving the money, the elf administrator left the room. To put it simply, the purpose of these negotiations was to convince the owner to adjust the rental requirements. Whether or not the player gained the upper hand would depend on their luck. After 5 minutes, the elf administrator returned with new rental conditions for the Forest Traveler. Now, instead of paying a full year of rent for the Forest Traveler, Sherfong could secure the establishment for 10 months of rent at 54,000 gold. While this new condition had reduced the total payment and shortened the required lease duration, the average monthly rent had increased considerably. This wasn't a favorable option. Declining the option, Sherfong paid 1,000 gold for another negotiation attempt. The second negotiation's outcome still required annual rent, but it could be paid in installments. Sherfong would have to pay a 50,000 gold down payment. However, he'd then have to pay 15,000 within 1 month. Seeing this result, Sherfong regretted leaving Icarus's heart with Aqua Rose. If he had the godly necklace with him right now, he might have had a better result. With no other choice, Sherfong gritted his teeth and paid for the third negotiation attempt. If the conditions were still too stringent, he would have to give up on the Forest Traveler for now. After all, the Forest Traveler would not generate much income within a short period. Meanwhile, he was extremely tight for money right now. Although the Forest Traveler was tempting, he needed to earn a large sum of coins quickly. As the elf administrator returned for the third time, Sherfong silently prayed that the new rental conditions were in his favor. Congratulations, Lord Demon Hunter. After our third round of negotiations, the Forest Traveler's owner has agreed to adjust the lease's duration to 6 months. However, you will have to pay 45,000 gold. In exchange, you will receive 40% of the Forest Traveler's profits instead of 20% during those 6 months. Chapter 1896 2-Star Restaurant. Chapter 1896 2-Star Restaurant. Half a year and 40% of the profits, for 45,000 gold? Sherfong fell deep in thought after hearing the elf administrator's final results. Once the Forest Traveler introduced the meal that granted the Forest Blessing buff, the various major powers would visit before any major operation. However, as the restaurant's business was limited by its size, and its overall income wasn't much more than a large hotel's, players would only gain the Forest Blessing buff when they ate the food that provided the buff in the restaurant. The food would not grant the buff if consumed elsewhere. Hence, Sherfong had considered giving the Forest Traveler up, selecting a dozen or so ordinary restaurants and hotels instead. However, the Forest Traveler's latest conditions were far better than they had been, especially the 40% profit sharing. This would grant him twice as much income as normal from the restaurant. With the Forest Traveler's advantage, it could generate enough income to rival a dozen or so establishments. All right, I agree to the owner's conditions, Sherfong said after giving the matter some thought. Although renting a single restaurant for 45,000 gold was a little extravagant, not only would he get double the profits in return, but he would also have an advantage when gaining the Forest Blessing buff. This would ensure that Zero Wings members wouldn't have to wait in line for hours to get a seat before raiding an important team dungeon. He could simply reserve a table for Zero Wings' exclusive use. No power had taken control of the Forest Traveler in his previous life. It had been under NPC's full control. As a result, the restaurant's development had been left to the system's discretion. Compared to player-managed hotels and restaurants back then, the Forest Traveler's development speed had been pitiful. If he managed the Forest Traveler, the restaurant's development speed would increase by a significant margin. After all, with the Forest Blessing buff, the restaurant would not lack popularity or income. If he played his cards right, he could earn a fortune through the restaurant. Immediately, Sherfong signed a lease contract with the elf administrator. In addition to the 45,000 gold for the Forest Traveler, he spent another 70,000 gold to rent 23 hotels and restaurants. Although the hotels and restaurants he had rented varied in size, they were all situated in strategic locations throughout the city. They were all near important buildings and special establishments. Once the city's second seal had been removed, which should happen in the next few days, a large number of players would surge into the Sea of Trees. At that time, his hotels and restaurants would officially begin to make money. The 24 hotels and restaurants he rented should generate even more profit than Silverwing Town's teleportation service. Silverwing Town's teleportation service would lure players to the town and increase its competitive edge. As a result, the town could only earn a small amount of money from each player with the teleportation service. However, such considerations weren't necessary when operating the Sea of Trees hotels and restaurants. Even if he only received 20% of the profits from each customer, he should earn at least 10 times more per customer than from Silverwing Town's teleportation service. Once Sherfong had rented his establishments, he left the VIP reception room. The 3 superpowers merchant players were still carefully selecting lands for purchase. Over 20 of the available lands had already been bought, many of which were located in the city's inner area. Sherfong had to admit that these superpowers' spending power was astonishing. Zero Wings simply couldn't compare. If these superpowers had known the value of leasing the city's hotels and restaurants, they would have claimed half of the city's establishments by now. They would have monopolized every hotel and restaurant, not including those in the central district, by the time the second seal was removed. They wouldn't leave other powers the opportunity to claim a share of the profits. However, the value of these establishments had been discovered quite late in the past, and the various major powers had still rented quite a few for themselves. As Sherfong returned to the lobby, the superpowers representatives spared him a glance before returning to their lists. Now that my business here is done, I should take a proper look at the forest traveler. After glancing at the other players, Sherfong left the city hall, making his way towards the forest traveler. He was not interested in competing with the three superpowers over the city's lands in the slightest. His lack of reaction wasn't due to a lack of interest in purchasing the city's lands, but because he didn't qualify to do so. Purchasing a plot of land and setting up a shop here would easily cost more than 10,000 gold. Although these shops would pay for themselves in the long run, he currently needed his money. He could not afford such long-term investments right now. After riding his demonic flame tiger for half an hour, Sherfong arrived before a 2-story restaurant near the edge of the city. This area wasn't as lively as the central district as there were only a dozen or so NPCs roaming the street. Meanwhile, the street's few shops only sold groceries, and the highest class building was a 3-story smithy. Smoke swirled out of the smithy as the sound of metal on metal echoed down the street. The view here was one of a kind. A sea of clouds enclosed the district, and flying beasts occasionally soared by. Due to the refreshing scenery, many leisure players would settle here long-term. Sure enough, business here is bleak. When Sherfong entered the forest traveler, he noticed that, aside from the restaurant owner and 2 staff members, there was nobody inside the restaurant. The 2 waitresses were members of foreign races. One was a female catkin with cat ears and tail, while the other was a female foxkin with a pair of pointed ears atop her head and a bushy tail. The restaurant owner was a long-haired elf, but unlike most elves, the man was burly. He looked like a nature-bomb shield warrior or berserker. Based on the scars gracing the elf's arms and neck, it was clear that he had once been an adventurer. "Welcome, Lord Demon Hunter. Thank you for renting our restaurant. I am Joseph, the owner of this establishment," Joseph the elf said respectfully when he noticed Sherfong enter the restaurant. "May I know what business you have here?" When the 2 half-beast women saw Sherfong, they nervously lowered their heads. They did not even dare to look Sherfong in the eye. Of course, Sherfong didn't find this strange. Although the Sea of Trees was a trade city that welcomed both humans and members of neutral races, the secret land that contained the Sea of Trees was still within the Dark Knight Empire's borders. Meanwhile, humans weren't generally friendly towards other races. Hence, surviving in the Sea of Trees wasn't easy for them. The half-beast women couldn't afford to provoke nobles, in particular. A single mistake could even result in their enslavement. "I wish to see all of the information available on this restaurant. Can I trouble you to prepare it for me?" Sherfong asked. Although he had rented the restaurant, he only had partial management rights. This was the case for other NPC-operated establishments, as well. It was impossible for players to acquire full management rights over an NPC establishment. Players could only gain full rights over the establishments and lands sold at the city hall. "All right, please wait a moment," Joseph said. A short moment later, Joseph returned with a thick tome. He then set the book before Sherfong. "Amazing. This restaurant has 2 master cooking recipes. It's a pity that the required materials are so rare. The shop front is also the cheapest variety. It's no wonder why business is so terrible." Sherfong was surprised as he read the restaurant's information. Many players in God's Domain had chosen the chef subclass. Not only were chefs capable of creating delicious dishes, but some of those dishes also provided additional effects, such as temporary attribute increases. Master dishes, in particular, provided significant attribute boosts, high enough to rival the effects of master potions. Although players could cook master dishes after becoming master chefs, producing one of these dishes was actually quite difficult. The first issue was the lack of recipes. Even a master chef would struggle when concocting a master cooking recipe. In the past, 8 out often basic master chefs lacked a master cooking recipe. The second issue was the lack of materials. Yet, the forest traveler actually possessed 2 master cooking recipes, which gave it an advantage over larger restaurants. Unlike the forest blessing meal, these master dishes would still be effective when consumed outside of the restaurant. Meanwhile, the attribute increase they provided was even superior to master potions. Both dishes would see very high demand. If he could mass-produce the dishes, he could make a fortune. When Shifeng inspected the restaurant's shopfront, he noticed that the Forest Traveler already met most of the conditions for its upgrade to a 2-star restaurant. All it lacked was sales. However, even NPCs weren't willing to visit the area. How could the restaurant earn an income without any customers? If the restaurant wanted to attract NPC customers and increase its sales, the easiest way to do so was to upgrade the shop front. Only upgrading the shop front would require 1,500 gold. The thought of gaining a 2-star restaurant tempted Shifeng. Immediately, he chose to upgrade the shop front. Suddenly, the system deducted 1,500 gold from the 3,000 plus he had remaining in his bag. Chapter 1897 Master Dishes. Chapter 1897 Master Dishes. As soon as Shifeng chose to upgrade the shopfront, the Forest Traveler started to change. In less than 5 seconds, the Forest Traveler transformed from a shabby, 2-story restaurant into an exquisite, 3-story establishment. The restaurant was now far more appealing than the surrounding shops. However, the interior had changed far more than the restaurant's exterior. The space inside the restaurant had more than doubled. Originally, the first floor had only had room for a little over 10 tables, but now, it could hold more than 30. The second floor had also become a dining area, and the living area had been moved to the 3rd floor. Currently, however, the interior's design was still modest. Shifeng would have to spend more gold to decorate the place. Next, I have to figure out how to lure customers here to increase the restaurant's business. Shifeng nodded in satisfaction at the new Forest Traveler. Although he had to pay for the restaurant's upgrade with his own money, now that the restaurant's quality had improved, he could charge customers more. At the same time, the restaurant's increased size could hold more customers at one time, increasing profits further. However, Shifeng was more concerned with the 2 master dishes. One of the 2 master dishes was drunken tiger meat, while the other was called frozen bone soup. When consumed, the drunken tiger meat increased players' strength by 10% for 6 hours. As for the frozen bone soup, it increased players' intelligence by 10% for 6 hours. Neither dish had a cooldown. Hence, even if the buffs were removed by a skill or death, players could consume another dish to regain the benefits. To physical and magical class players, a 10% increase in strength or intelligence would provide a significant boost to combat power. Moreover, the 2 dishes' effects could stack with similar potions. The only downside was that the drunken tiger meat and frozen bone soup's buffs would vanish upon death. In contrast, many master potions would remain in effect. However, there was a positive to these 2 master dishes. If players entered special dungeons or environments that prevented the use of external tools, they wouldn't lose the dish's buffs. Hence, the drunken tiger meat and frozen bone soup would be of significant help during his planned Void Serpent raid. Since the Forest Traveler was only a 1-star restaurant, its only chef had been the owner, Joseph. Even if he provided the dishes' required materials, their production speed would be limited. Now, when Shifeng examined the restaurant's menu, he saw that the drunken tiger meat only needed 10 minutes to cook, while the frozen bone soup only required 8 minutes. However, since he had upgraded the restaurant, he could now hire 2 more chefs. He could double the dish's production speed if he did. As for the required materials, Silverwing could collect them in a short time. Following which, Shifeng called up the Forest Traveler's system interface. In no time at all, he managed to hire 2 more chefs and 8 more waiters. He then reopened the Forest Traveler for business. Less than 5 minutes, the restaurant welcomed its first NPC customer. Although the promotion was as effective as he had hoped, it was tolerable. In God's domain, a leased restaurant didn't only earn an income from player customers. It could also earn money from NPCs. Only, the profit sharing for income from NPC customers was much lower, only 1/4 of that from players. However, while this amount seemed insignificant, NPCs provided daily income. As the restaurant's star rank and size continued to improve, it would generate more income from NPCs. Currently, the Forest Traveler was a 1-star restaurant, and could only earn about 3 to 10 gold from NPCs each day. However, once it became a 2-star restaurant, it could earn around 30 to 100 gold per day from NPCs. Most importantly, the restaurant would gain more master cooking recipes. The restaurant's accommodations would become higher quality, as well. Players didn't determine accommodation fees in the Sea of Trees. Rather, the system would set a price based on the hotel or restaurant's size, star rank, and popularity. The minimum accommodation fee for a 1-star establishment in the city would be 50 silver, while the maximum was 1 gold. For 2-star accommodation, the minimum price was 2 gold, while the maximum was 5 gold. Hence, accommodation fees in the Sea of Trees ranged from 50 silver to 5 gold. Establishments could only rise to 2-star status in the city. However, 2-star restaurants and hotels were very rare in the Sea of Trees. They were all concentrated in the central district, but players would need sufficient status and contribution points to rent these establishments. Though once players crowded the Sea of Trees, those who owned 2-star hotels and restaurants would earn a massive income from their establishments. After Shifeng dealt with the forest traveler, he contacted Melancholic Smile and had her collect the required materials for the drunken tiger meat and frozen bones soup as quickly as possible. Then, using the Abyss pendant, Shifeng left an Abyss marker in his office in the forest traveler. With this, he could return to the Sea of Trees even without a key. Of course, there was an easier method to return. He could upgrade one of his leased establishments to 2-star status. He'd be able to head to a magic store and purchase a special teleportation scroll. Although the teleportation scroll costs far more than a return scroll, each costing 5 silver coins, 2-star establishments' player staff could bind the teleportation scroll to the building. Players could then use the bound teleportation scroll to teleport back to the establishment. Since the forest traveler wasn't yet 2-star rank, it didn't have this function. Hence, Shifeng had to rely on the Abyss pendant. Once Melancholic Smile had gathered the necessary materials, Shifeng teleported to White River City's guild residence to collect them. After retrieving the materials from the guild warehouse, he used Abyss teleport to return to the forest traveler. He then had Joseph and the 2 new chefs begin their work in the kitchen. While waiting for the chefs to complete the dishes, Shifeng returned to White River City's Candlelight trading firm to produce advanced mana armor kits and Titan City's standardized dark gold weapons. He used this opportunity to upgrade the weapons of Zero Wing's members and earn the forging proficiency required to become an intermediate master forger. Previously, he had acquired several hundred sets of materials necessary for forging the standardized dark gold weapons from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Unyielding Soul. Meanwhile, as Cream Cocoa and Melancholic Smile were both busy with the Hell Tank components, these items' production rate had considerably slowed. Even now, there was a huge pile of materials left unused. In his special forging room, Shifeng forged weapons without rest, steadily and rapidly filling his experience bar. As he crafted dark gold weapons, not only did his forging proficiency increase, but he also gained EXP faster than grinding normal monsters. After 2 days of work, Shifeng had reached 75% of level 69. He was now less than 30% away from the level 70 threshold. He was also less than 20,000 proficiency points away from becoming an intermediate master forger. Shifeng had also forged 300+ standardized dark gold weapons and 200+ advanced mana armor kits. Shifeng used 130 dark gold weapons to upgrade the Abyssal Blade to level 55. Although the improvement wasn't earth-shattering this time, its attack power had risen from 2,070 to 2,350. All basic attributes had also increased by 192 points, rather than the previous 170 points, and the weapon's attack speed had risen by 29 instead of 27. This change increased the attack power of Shifeng's subarm immensely. However, the Abyssal Blade still couldn't compare to Killing Ray, whose level increased or decreased with its users. However, Shifeng was satisfied with this result. After all, the Abyssal Blade was a top-tier epic weapon now. If he evolved it further, it would become as powerful as fragmented legendary weapons. It's about time. I should go and collect the dishes. After a glance at the time, Shifeng used Abyss Transfer to return to the Sea of Trees. As Shifeng returned to the Forest Traveler, he noticed that the restaurant had considerably more NPC customers. At least, it wasn't as deserted as it had been. There were even 6 customers dining in the first-floor hall. A short moment later, Shifeng collected 300 sets of drunken tiger meat and 500 bowls of frozen bone soup from Joseph. He then teleported back to the guild residence in Zero Wing City. When Cola, Alluring Summer, and their companions noticed Shifeng's arrival in the guild hall's lounge, they ran up to greet him. "Hee hee, guild leader, look! I'm level 60 now," Cola said as he gleefully revealed his level, proving to Shifeng that he had worked very hard while grinding monsters. Every 5 levels was a minor turning point in God's domain. Meanwhile, level 60 happened to be one of those turning points that gave players a small boost to their attributes. "Guild leader, why did you recall us so suddenly?" Alluring Summer asked after rolling her eyes at Cola. You too, try on these 2 set equipment," Shifeng said, nodding. He then took out the Sins of Thunderfire set and the Scorching Wind set, which he had acquired from the Flame Demon King, handing them to Alluring Summer and Cola. Chapter 1898 Gathering at Zero Wing City. Chapter 1898 Gathering at Zero Wing City. Set equipment? Both Alluring Summer and Cola looked at the 2 set equipment Shifeng had taken out, a little confused. While they were not trying to brag, their current equipment was among the best available in God's domain right now. Only epic equipment could surpass what they wore. "Just try it out," Shifeng said. Although he could see the confusion plaguing the 2, he didn't bother to offer any additional explanation. With no other choice, Alluring Summer and Cola complied, trying on the set equipment. "This is a level 70 set equipment?" Alluring Summer's eyes widened in shock when she saw the Sins of Thunderfire set's attributes. The Sins of Thunderfire set was a level 70 fine gold set equipment, though Shifeng had only given her 4 of the 6 pieces. Even so, the Thunderfire set's attributes were far superior to the level 60 dark gold equipment she currently wore. Moreover, the Sins of Thunderfire set's set effects were simply tyrannical. The 2-piece set effect increased casting speed by 20%, cast range by 20%, and magic damage dealt by 20%. As for the 4-piece set effect, it increased all basic attributes by 15% and granted the use of the Tier 3 spell, Thunderburst, a dual-element spell that dealt both flame and lightning damage. Meanwhile, Cola was incomparably excited after receiving the Scorching Wind set. Unlike Alluring Summer, he had received a complete, 6-piece level 70 fine gold set equipment. As Shifeng had already equipped the 2 sets with attribute gemstones and level reduction gemstones, Alluring Summer and Cola could equip the sets right away. "Amazing! Just equipping this set has pushed my defense past 35,000 and HP past 100,000. Cola was stunned when he inspected his updated attribute panel. "Not even a Tier 2 Berserker can budge me, now. Not even receiving a level 60 Mythic Monster's attack will be a problem. If Turtledove and Yi Women saw this, they'd die with envy." Even without any team buffs, he had 100,000 HP. He was basically a humanoid boss. Reaching 120,000 HP shouldn't even be impossible with team buffs. Currently, Turtledove and Yi Women only had 85,000 HP after receiving team buffs, which only the best Tier 2 MTs had at this stage of the game. Not only had his HP soared past his 2 companions, but he was also a strength-focused MT. He had only invested a small fraction of his free attribute points in endurance. "Alright, it's time to go. We can't keep the other guilds waiting for too long," Shifeng said, nodding in satisfaction when he saw Cola and Alluring Summer's attributes. With this, he was more confident of taking down the Void Serpent. Following which, Shifeng led Cola and the others to one of the 4 Towers of Elements, the meeting point he had agreed upon with Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor. The members of both super first-rate guilds had already arrived, but to avoid attracting attention, they all wore black cloaks. Despite their efforts, however, the group of 400 players was simply too large to ignore. Furthermore, these players were all Tier 2 experts from major guilds, so the aura they radiated instilled fear in others. Although these experts had done their best to suppress their auras, the combined energy of 400 experts was stifling. Who are those people? I don't mean to brag, but I can be considered an expert player as well, so why do those people feel so dangerous? I caught a glimpse of their equipment a moment ago, and they're all wearing multiple pieces of level 50 fine gold equipment. I've spent many days grinding to reach level 54, but even now, I only have one piece of level 50 secret silver equipment, yet they have multiple pieces of level 50 fine gold equipment. Could they be members from a top adventurer team? Curiosity pulled at the passers-by when they looked at Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members, but the super first-rate guild's players simply ignored the surrounding crowd, waiting in the tower's main hall in silence. Vice Guild Leader Zero Wing is quite impressive. It actually developed Zero Wing City to such a prosperous state. I get the feeling that it's even more prosperous than Starmoon City. A slender youth wielding a wooden staff commented, astonished as he observed the players in the tower. Indeed. Zero Wing City's development is surprising. It's no wonder why so many corporations are trying to invest in it. The income of Zero Wing City alone could easily sustain a first-rate guild's daily operation. Illusory Words said, nodding. I wonder which mythic boss Zero Wing plans to raid this time? On their way to the tower, they had noticed that Zero Wing City's player population was in no way inferior to that of Star Moon City. Many of the city's residents were even elite and expert players. Quite a few major trading firms had also set up shop here. However, the most unbelievable part about the city had to be its number of NPC merchants, which sold plenty of rare items. According to our investigation on Starmoon Kingdom, there are only 16 known mythic bosses between level 50 and level 60 inches the kingdom. Since Zero Wing has gathered us in Zero Wing City, I assume that they are targeting the level 56 Emerald Dryad in the Witches' Hills Forest. However, I have heard that the Emerald Dryad is extremely difficult to deal with. There will be several hundred treants guarding the Dryad, as well, all of which are level 50 lords and above. Among them are more than 30 great lords and 4 grand lords. Even with the combined strength of our guild's team and Unyielding Souls, raiding the Emerald Dryad will be quite challenging. If we include 600 Tier 1 and Tier 2 experts from Zero Wing, our chances of success are. The slender youth said, shaking his head. Just dealing with the several hundred treants would be a major problem, not to mention defeating the mythic boss itself. Zero Wing should have a plan. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given up such a good opportunity to make money, hiring our guild's experts instead. Illusory Words reasoned. God's domain had many tools to offer, and with an appropriate tool, challenging a field mythic boss wasn't that difficult. One of the most common examples of such tools was the variety of magic arrays. While Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members wondered how Zero Wing planned to take down the Emerald Dryad, a large group of cloaked players appeared in the tower's entrance. These cloaked players were none other than Zero Wing's members. The group consisted of exactly 600 players. Naturally, such a large team's arrival attracted the attention of the players in the tower. How is this possible? The slender youth beside Illusory Words stared at the approaching Zero Wing members with a flabbergasted expression. What's wrong? They're not Zero Wing's members? Illusory Words asked strangely. The slender youth was Dawnmaster, one of Crimson Emperor's top 10 elementalists. He also possessed an identification skill called Demon Eye, which allowed him to ignore Black Cloak's concealment. No. They are all from Zero Wing, but those people. They are all Tier 2. Dawnmaster explained in a trembling voice. Chapter 1899 World Boss. Chapter 1899 World Boss. They're all Tier 2? Illusory Words spun towards the approaching Zero Wing members after hearing Dawnmaster's statement. In a low tone, she asked, There are 600 people here. Are you sure you're not mistaken? Although she could tell that the approaching players were powerful experts, she found it a little frightening that all 600 were Tier 2. All of the various superpowers had an increasingly large number of players that had already completed their Tier 2 promotion quests, but even the weaker superpowers were still some time from amassing a 500-man, Tier 2 team, let alone a 600-man team. The Tier 2 promotion quests weren't easy challenges to overcome. The quest had heavy requirements of both technique and equipment standards. Of course, some players, such as independent players with good equipment and techniques, would challenge the lowest difficulty promotion quests. The advantage a Tier 2 class had over a Tier 1 was simply too massive. Not only would players gain a huge boost to their basic attributes once they reached Tier 2, but their physique would also improve significantly. With these improvements, players would have a much easier time questing and grinding monsters. However, players that selected a low-difficulty promotion quest would face severe consequences. Their Tier 3 promotion quest would be far more difficult than normal. The majority of independent players chose to acquire their Tier 2 class as soon as possible to secure better resources now, but large guild experts were a different story. As these experts had their guild's support, they didn't lack resources. Naturally, to ensure that they had an easier time with their Tier 3 promotion quests, these experts would challenge the harder Tier 2 promotion quests. They invested a lot of time in improving their levels, equipment, and techniques to complete the higher difficulty promotion quests, establishing a sturdy foundation so they could walk a smoother path in the future. Meanwhile, Zero Wing was a guild with abundant resources due to its gold mines like Zero Wing City and Silverwing Town. There was no doubt that Zero Wing had prepared its experts to challenge high-difficulty promotion quests. However, just how many members did Zero Wing possess? How many experts had the guild nurtured? Comparing Zero Wing to a superpower was akin to comparing a firefly to the moon. The two were on entirely different levels. Yet, the guild had just revealed 600 Tier 2 players, already surpassing many superpowers. Vice Guild Leader, I wish I were wrong, but players can't fake the Tier 2 class insignias. Every one of those players has a Tier 2 class insignia equipped, Dawnmaster said, smiling bitterly. He had inspected Zero Wing's members multiple times, but the Tier 2 class insignia beneath their black cloaks was conspicuous to his eyes. There was no way he would mistake those insignias. Moreover, he hadn't told Illusory Words everything. Among the 600 Zero Wing members, 4 were level 60 and more than 50 were level 59. He also couldn't identify Shifeng's level. The highest level player in the Dark Knight Empire was only level 58. According to Crimson Emperor's investigation, this fact included the players that habitually hid their levels. Once players reached such a high level, they'd require a massive amount of EXP to level up, and although players could grind more efficiently and gain EXP more quickly once they had reached Tier 2, they'd still need a lot of time to grind to the next level. Yet, Zero Wing had over 50 Tier 2 players at level 59. There were even 4 level 60 players. If the guild wished it, it could easily monopolize the top 50 spots on the Dark Knight Empire's ranking list. 1 or 2 levels higher might not mean much to ordinary players, but once players reached level 50 and gained their Tier 2 class, their natural attribute growth would increase significantly, exceeding the free attribute points each level up awarded. A gap of 2 levels could mean a difference of 30 points in one's main attribute. Taking into account the free attribute points, the gap would become even larger. If the level gap increased to 5 levels, the difference in attributes would be so massive that it would be akin to equipping an additional piece of top-tier equipment. This was the frightening aspect of level differences. This was also why many independent players had opted to complete their Tier 2 promotion quests as soon as possible, leveling up more quickly. Zero Wing has already developed to such an extent. When Illusory Words thought about Zero Wing openly declaring war against Blackwater and the Ore Empire, she realized the source of Zero Wing's confidence. It was no wonder why Zero Wing dared to provoke Blackwater with so many Tier 2 experts. When he saw Zero Wing's members, Unyielding Heart was similarly surprised. Unyielding Soul also had players with high-ranked identification skills, after all, but compared to Illusory Words, Unyielding Heart was stupefied by the discovery. Unyielding Heart had raided the Eclipse Throne alongside Zero Wing's members, so he had known how many Tier 2 players the guild had. While it was possible that Zero Wing had hidden some of its Tier 2 players, it shouldn't have been able to hide so many. Despite the short time that had passed since the Eclipse Throne raid, Zero Wing now had at least 600 Tier 2 players. The guild's development speed was disturbing. "Since everyone's here, let's set out," Shifeng said once he stood before Unyielding Heart and Illusory Words. "If we linger, I'm afraid that we'll attract even more attention." The two vice guild leaders exchanged a glance before nodding to Shifeng's statement. They had already attracted a lot of attention. If they stayed, they would likely attract the various major powers' notice. Raiding a field boss was a dangerous task, especially if it was a mythic boss. If God's domain's other powers discovered their operation, they could be ambushed during the raid. Immediately, the two merged their respective 200-man teams with Shifeng's. The team of 1,000 then moved to the tower's teleportation array. Once Shifeng had input the coordinates, the entire team vanished. Although some curious players had tried to follow the team, Shifeng had instructed the NPC soldier to erase the team's destination coordinates before he had left, replacing it with a random location. Players' figures began to appear, one after another, before a large waterfall within a dense forest. The lake at the base of the waterfall radiated a chilly air, making the new arrivals shiver. These new arrivals were none other than Shifeng and his companions. "Isn't this the Frost Jade Waterfall?" Illusory Words, who had memorized the various landmarks in the Witch's Hill, muttered. Turning toward Shifeng, she asked, "Aren't we raiding the Emerald Dryad in the Million Woodland?" The Frost Jade Waterfall was nowhere near the Million Woodland. In fact, the two locations were on opposite ends of the map. Although a dense forest surrounded the Frost Jade Waterfall, this area didn't have any monsters or resources. No player would grind in such a deserted location. Needless to say, this area didn't have any field bosses. Unyielding Heart nodded in agreement. Based on Unyielding Soul's research, the Emerald Dryad should be the only mythic boss in the Witch's Hill. Moreover, the forest the Emerald Dryad resided in was rich with herbs. If Zero Wing killed the Emerald Dryad, it would significantly lower the danger players faced while exploring the Million Forest, making it easier to harvest rare herbs. Logically, Zero Wing should target the Emerald Dryad. "No, I'm aiming for a different boss," Shifeng said, shaking his head. "The boss is inside this lake. If anyone's ice resistance is lower than 20 points, see me for an ice resistance potion." The lake bed was entirely composed of frost jade, and the cold air the jade emitted was extremely powerful. Players would freeze to death in less than 30 seconds without any ice resistance, only surviving long-term if they had 20 points or more. Fortunately, fulfilling that requirement wasn't any trouble to the Tier 2 players present. As experts, they all had some equipment or ornament that granted magic resistance, which would also serve as a sort of universal resistance. Even without such items, they still had passive skills that granted some magic resistance. Furthermore, their respective guilds would have prepared some ice and fire resistance equipment to cater to unexpected situations. Hence, only a small number of players on the team failed to meet the requirement. After Shifeng distributed ice resistance potions to the 100-plus players who didn't meet the requirement, he instructed the team to jump into the water without offering an explanation. A small cave hid under the Frost Jade waterfall, large enough for 5 people to swim through at the same time. This cave was the entrance to the Void Serpent's underground temple. After swimming through the cave for around 3 minutes, the first group discovered an exit. As players emerged from the tunnel, they arrived in a dark cavern. Ancient murals covered the cavern walls, depicting the history of the Witch's Hill. When these players broke through the water's surface, they were amazed by the scene. They had never expected to find such a place hidden beneath the Frost Jade waterfall. Unfortunately, the players who lacked understanding of divine runes failed to comprehend the murals on the walls. The players who were familiar with divine runes, however, quickly realized that the murals depicted the Otherworld Gate and the method of activating it. Once the team had finished admiring the murals, they proceeded into another long, dark tunnel. When they left the tunnel, the team arrived in another cavern. This time, the team found a temple within, and unlike the previous cavern, this one was as large as a town and brightly illuminated. Lifting their heads, the team discovered a gigantic, glowing crystal embedded in the cavern's ceiling. This crystal lit the cavern until it was as bright as day. While everyone admired the glowing crystal, they discovered something that caused their stomachs to churn and a frown to pull at their lips. Coiled around the crystal was a snake that was over 100 meters long. The serpent's body was made entirely of translucent crystal. At the moment, the serpent's eyes were shut, and if not for the occasional twitch, the players would have treated it as a part of the shining crystal. The serpent's head was easily the size of a 3-story building, and its eyes alone were easily larger than a human. As they gazed up at the monster, an instinctive fear gripped their hearts. After a closer look at the serpent's statistics, many of the players felt their knees go weak. Void Serpent, Wakenet, Realm Lord, Void Creature, Mythic. Level 60. HP 560, 000, 000/560, 000, 000. A world boss. Illusory words and unyielding heart gasped in shock. When they saw the Void Serpent's HP bars, they felt an unprecedented pressure bear down as terror overwhelmed them. There was no definitive indication of whether a field boss was a world boss or not in God's domain. However, one thing differentiated the two: how many HP bars the boss possessed. Normal Grand Lord ranked field bosses had around 3 to 5 HP bars, while Mythic ranked field bosses had 5 to 7 HP bars. Meanwhile, based on the various large guilds' understanding of world bosses, such a monster should have 8 or more HP bars. While more HP bars didn't necessarily increase a boss's total HP, depleting each bar would alter the boss's combat method, increasing the raid's difficulty. The Void Serpent before them had a total of 9 HP bars. Chapter 1900 Madness. Chapter 1900 Madness. The Void Serpent was curled up and sleeping peacefully on the ceiling, and none of the present players dared to move for fear of awaking the world boss. They had never dealt with a world boss before, so they did not know how wide its perception range was. On the off chance that the Void Serpent discovered them, they would pay for their mistake with their lives. Guild Leader Black Flame, you're not planning to fight that Void Serpent, right? Illusory words softly asked Shifeng. Although she understood that since Shifeng had brought them here, there was a 99% chance that the Void Serpent was his target. Her sanity urged her to confirm her suspicion. For all she knew, this cavern might have 2 bosses, and they were actually here for the other one. It's this Void Serpent. Shifeng nodded. Illusory Words was silent for a long moment. She decided that Shifeng must be insane. That was a world boss they were talking about. Ordinary mythic monsters were no match for the Void Serpent, and magical tools were utterly useless against world bosses. In other words, they had no special means of weakening the Void Serpent. They would have to fight it at its peak. Even with their berserk skills, peak MTs wouldn't last more than a few hits. The Void Serpent would likely kill the other classes instantly. Moreover, the Void Serpent was a Realm Lord. Its skills, spells, and physique were far superior to mythic monsters of the same level. Defeating this monster would be even more difficult than facing the Emerald Dryad and its several hundred guards. Although their team of 1,000 Tier 2 players met the requirements to raid a level 60 world boss, they barely managed it. If they wanted to raid the world boss effectively, all 1,000 members would have to be level 60, and wear level 50 fine gold equipment, or better. Taking a deep breath, Illusory Words looked at Shifeng and said seriously, Guild Leader Black Flame, let me say this. The dangers of raiding a world boss are too great. Crimson Emperor will only help you once. If it looks like we'll team wipe, Crimson Emperor's members will retreat. If she allowed 200 of her guild's Tier 2 experts to lose a level, her guild would suffer a massive blow. She would not follow Zero Wing in its descent into madness. Unyielding Heart, however, said nothing. He simply watched the Void Serpent before turning to Zero Wing's members. Vice Guild Leader, aren't you going to inform Zero Wing of your limits? Long Soul whispered. That's a world boss we're talking about. Our guild can't afford to lose so many Tier 2 players. Lately, the intensity of the struggle between Unyielding Soul and Starlink had grown. As a result, the guild needed its Tier 2 experts to manage many affairs. Unyielding Soul could not afford to weaken 200 of its Tier 2 experts for no reason. If the raid turned sour, they had to retreat to minimize their losses. However, Unyielding Heart did not answer Long Soul's question. Instead, he walked up to Shifeng solemnly. Guild leader Black Flame, Unyielding Soul is willing to fight to the death alongside Zero Wing. In return, please consider selling Unyielding Soul a few pieces of MT equipment once the raid is over. Unyielding Heart said sincerely. Heart, are you insane? Unyielding Heart's proposal shocked Long Soul. Illusory Words also turned to the other Vice Guild leader, confusion flashing in her eyes. The various superpowers still relied on special tools for a small chance of defeating ordinary mythic bosses, yet not only were they about to raid a mythic world boss, but they also had to do so without any tools. Unyielding Heart was one of Unyielding Soul's supporting pillars of strength. He had invested a lot of time and effort into developing his guild. She couldn't understand why Unyielding Heart would take such a massive risk, especially with Unyielding Soul's current state in the Dark Knight Empire. Does Zero Wing really have a chance of defeating the Void Serpent? Illusory Words could not help but wonder as she swept a glance over Zero Wing's members. She couldn't see what ability Zero Wing had to face the Void Serpent. Meanwhile, Unyielding Heart ignored Long Soul's attempts to dissuade him. Instead, he remained focused on Shifeng as he continued. Of course, we will purchase the equipment at above market price as long as the items are level 60 fine gold weapons or equipment. The fact that Zero Wing intended to challenge a world boss had surprised him greatly, but he had witnessed the strength of Zero Wing's main force before. He doubted that the guild would attempt a challenge it wasn't confident of overcoming. After all, Zero Wing had dispatched 600 Tier 2 experts for this raid. Hence, he would gamble on Zero Wing's ability to defeat the Void Serpent. Even the various superpowers only had a small stock of top-tier level 55 equipment, let alone level 60 equipment. If he could acquire a few pieces of level 60 fine gold weapons and equipment for his MTs, it would definitely be of great help to Unyielding Soul during future team dungeon raids. Unyielding Soul had many expert teams, and a single Dark Corrosion set wasn't nearly enough to satisfy the guild's needs. Alright, I'll see what I can do. Shifeng replied to Unyielding Heart's sincerity with a serious nod. Level 60 fine gold equipment for MTs was nothing to Shifeng. Selling a few pieces of such equipment in exchange for Unyielding Soul's full support in the following raid was definitely a worthwhile transaction. The difference between the combat power willing Tier 2 experts wielded and that of experts who were prepared to flee at a given moment was like the difference between heaven and earth. Thank you, Unyielding Heart said. Normally, when a guild employed another guild's experts to take down a powerful boss, it wouldn't sell any of the loot. Such items were crucial to strengthening a guild's teams and weren't usually available on the market, after all. Has Unyielding Heart gone mad? Does he really believe Zero Wing can succeed? Chaos gripped Dawnmaster's mind as he watched Unyielding Heart thank Shifeng. After witnessing the exchange between Unyielding Heart and Shifeng as they discussed the Void Serpent's loot, he wondered if the monster coiled on the ceiling was truly a world boss. He also wondered if the two players knew what a world boss was. After discussing the agreement with Unyielding Heart, Shifeng began to split the team into smaller groups and designated tasks to each. The Void Serpent would transition through a total of 9 different combat methods as the raid progressed, and all 9 stages would be extremely dangerous. A single mistake could result in a large number of deaths. However, all of these players were experts, and many of them had even reached the refinement realm. As long as they were instructed properly, they could avoid any major mistakes. Then they'd see if the boss would die before the team was annihilated. Since there are no problems, all MTs and magical class players, come here to collect a dish. I'll call up the physical class players after to collect their share, Shifeng announced after organizing the team. Following which, under Shifeng's instructions, everyone received the dishes Shifeng handed out. What a powerful master dish! Illusory Words was stunned when she accepted a bowl of frozen bone soup. She hadn't expected Zero Wing to be capable of securing such a top-tier dish. She was no stranger to chef's products. She knew that some dishes could enhance players' combat power. Unfortunately, most of the buff's food and beverages provided were minor, but this master dish increased her intelligence by 10%. The frozen bone soup could already rival a master potion. Moreover, the dish's effect would even be effective against the world boss. This buff reduced the raid difficulty by a considerable margin. Cola, start the raid! Everyone else, follow the plan! Shifeng commanded once his teammates were ready. Hearing Shifeng's command, Cola, who had long since grown restless, grinned fiercely as he charged forward to attract the Void Serpent's attention. Chapter 1901 Terrifying Defense. Chapter 1901 Terrifying Defense. Inside the crystal-filled cavern, after Shifeng gave the command to attack, the first MT party, led by Cola, charged straight at the Void Serpent. The other groups fanned out to set up an encirclement. As the Void Serpent was gigantic, even if they didn't fully understand the boss's attack range, it was common sense to stand apart from each other. If they stood too close to each other, they would present the world boss with a target-rich environment, which would easily result in a team wipe. When Cola's party got within 500 yards of the Void Serpent suddenly opened its amber eyes. An unprecedented killing intent immediately washed over everyone, causing their hearts to skip a beat. At this moment, it felt as if countless threads bound their bodies, impeding their movements. Dirty and pitiful mortals, you dare step into my territory? I'll have you join the dust that fills this space. Following which, the Void Serpent let loose an angry roar. A silver ripple spread across the entire cavern, with the Void Serpent as the center, the ground cracking as it came in contact with this ripple. In the next moment, a mud wave swept into the surroundings, taking only a brief moment to reach Cola's party. Defend! Cola shouted hurriedly when he saw the approaching 4-meter-tall mud wave. The other 5 MTs in Cola's party were level 57 and level 58 MTs from Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor. With Cola as the core, they quickly fell into a defensive formation. Following which, Cola activated the Tier 2 Skill Guardian Wall, which increased the defense of himself and players within a 10-yard radius of himself by 30% when blocking frontal attacks. In the next moment, a wall of light formed by 6 shields appeared before the healer party positioned behind Cola's party. Boom! When the mud wave crashed into the wall of light, the powerful impact sent Cola's MT party stumbling backward, the HP of the 6 MTs decreasing at a rate visible to the naked eye. Only after the 6 MTs had retreated by 8 yards did they manage to stabilize their footing. After suffering the Void Serpent's AoE attack, the MTs of Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor had lost at least 50,000 HP each. Each of them had a maximum HP below 80,000. Hence, that one AoE attack had instantly taken more than half of their HPs. This outcome caused everyone in the team to gasp involuntarily. So, this is a world boss? Illusory Words, who was part of the healer party standing behind Cola's party, was stunned as she looked at the Void Serpent, which had already lowered itself to the ground. With just one roar, the Void Serpent had inflicted over -50,000 damage each on the frontline MTs, who could be considered among the best MTs in God's domain right now. If that AoE attack had been a powerful melee attack instead, the consequences would have been unimaginable. At this point, she truly wondered how Zero-Wing planned to raid the Void Serpent. Did they even have a chance at victory? However, although Illusory Words doubted Zero-Wing's success, that did not affect her healing speed in the slightest. Right after seeing the MTs receiving damage, she started double casting 1 Tier 2 Healing Light and 1 Tier 1 Recover on Cola, fully displaying her abilities as one of the 10 great clerics in God's domain. Huh! Why is his HP? After Illusory Words finished casting her healing spells, she suddenly noticed that Cola still had close to 80% of his HP remaining. Meanwhile, thanks to her healing, his HP instantly recovered to full. However, before Illusory Words could figure out what was going on, the Void Serpent several hundred yards from the team's frontline launched another attack. After the boss let out a hiss, countless Void Spears appeared around it. The Void Spears then shot toward Cola's MT party in a blur, a series of sonic booms echoing throughout the cavern. Everyone, stand behind me! Cola shouted urgently when he noticed the frightening power contained in those Void Spears. Although the 5 other MTs had been healed back to 70% or so, if they were to receive this terrible attack without activating their life-saving skills, they were likely to get killed. After hearing Cola's command, the 5 MTs and 6 healers promptly lined up behind the Guardian Knight. In the next moment, the Void Spears crashed into Cola's shield one after another. However, not every Void Spear landed on the shield. Some brushed past his body and tore holes into his black cloak. Meanwhile, due to the Void Spear's strong destructive power, the black cloak's durability zeroed out instantly, the black cloak itself disintegrating into nothingness. The black cloak's disappearance exposed the silver suit of armor Cola wore, which shone with the glow unique to fine gold equipment. Crimson runes could be seen engraved all over the silver armor, and judging from how the runes matched perfectly, it was obvious that the suit of silver armor was fine gold set equipment. Meanwhile, with the black cloak gone, Cola's attributes were also on display for all to see, his maximum HP of 118,600 revealed to everyone. Moreover, as the black cloak was no longer present to suppress Cola's aura, the Tier 2 MTs standing behind him suddenly felt a powerful pressure bearing down on their bodies. How is this possible? Illusory Words fell into a daze when she saw Cola's HP bar. Even the strongest MT in Crimson Emperor had only a little over 80,000 HP after including team buffs, yet Cola had close to 120,000 HP. Moreover, Cola's defense was also as unbelievably high as his HP was. Despite not having activated any life-saving skills, Cola had lost less than 40,000 HP after receiving all those Void Spears. If it were any other Tier 2 metric tons standing in Cola's place just now, they would have been killed instantly by those Void Spears. After all, the Void Spears were a completely different attack from the Mud Wave before. The Mud Wave had simply been a casual greeting from the Void Serpent. Meanwhile, the Void Spears were the result of a spell. Those Void Spears should be much more powerful than the Mud Wave. At this moment, Illusory Words wasn't the only one surprised by this revelation. The other Tier 2 MTs in Cola's party were similarly stupefied. As they were also MTs, nobody understood more clearly than they did just how frightening a Tier 2 metric tons with close to 120,000 HP was. What kind of set equipment is he wearing? It's actually capable of forming a protective barrier around his body. I've seen every level 50 fine gold set equipment for MTs available in the game, and this is definitely not one of them. He's most likely wearing level 55 fine gold set equipment. Zero Wing is amazing. It actually managed to get its hands on this sort of set equipment. As the other Tier 2 MTs were very close to Cola, they could see that a faint layer of mana covered Cola's silver armor, forming a protective barrier that mitigated the Void Spear's damage tremendously. This situation was simply unbelievable. They had never seen fine gold set equipment like this before. Is this the reason why Black Flame is confident of defeating the Void Serpent? When Illusory Words looked at Cola's bear-like figure, she more or less understood why Zero Wing dared to challenge a world boss. The most important requirement when raiding a boss was a powerful MT. As long as the team had an MT capable of tanking the boss, then the raid definitely had a chance of succeeding. While everyone was still in shock, Cola took the initiative to charge at the Void Serpent. He wanted to get within attacking range of the Void Serpent as quickly as possible. However, the Void Serpent showed no signs of relenting as it continuously launched Void Spears at Cola from a distance. Meanwhile, the healer party led by Illusory Words kept healing him. Although each wave of Void Spears dealt close to minus 40,000 damage to Cola, the healers were still able to keep him alive and healthy without much effort. After all, Cola's massive HP granted Illusory Words and the others a lot of leeway when healing. They could afford to cast powerful healing spells, which had long cast times. After running for a short moment, Cola arrived before the Void Serpent. Foolish mortals! All your efforts are futile! Upon seeing Cola closing in on itself, the Void Serpent sent its tail whipping at the Guardian Knight. Despite its gigantic size, the Void Serpent's tail moved with lightning speed, so fast that it even tore space. The strong air pressure the tail created impeded the movements of the other Tier 2 MTs, which turned sluggish. They couldn't help Cola block the attack in time, However, unlike the other MTs in his party, Cola remained completely unaffected by the powerful air pressure, swiftly raising the Titan guard to block the attack. Boom! The ground beneath Cola shattered. The impact was so powerful that even the players standing over 100 yards away could feel the ground underfoot shaking. When everyone present saw the devastated terrain before the Void Serpent, they stared in stupefaction despite themselves. The Void Serpent's frightening destructive power woke a sense of hopelessness in everyone. As the dust settled, everyone quickly noticed a figure standing amid the dirt and rubble. This figure was none other than Cola. Meanwhile, beside Cola's body lay the Void Serpent's tail. He managed to block even that. When everyone saw that Cola still retained over half of his HP, they could not help gaping in shock. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.